Mic, camera, action.
You okay?
Yeah, I'm fine, mate. Don't worry about it.
You alright?
Enjoy LA.
Welcome back to Filmography, the show dedicated to watching every credited film for an actor's complete back catalogue from past debut through to present day in chronological order. Each episode, I'm joined by an esteemed guest or guests to watch and discuss the next entry from the focused filmography and consider how it ranks amidst their career and whether we can trace any typecasting trends or topic traits or theatrical tics. For episode 9, I'm joined by the Dream Team M&M to discuss the 9th and briefest appearance of the Stath in Collateral. We watch, you listen, and hopefully watch along too. So Mike, Megan, thank you so much for agreeing to appear on the show to discuss this classy cruise and Mann thriller that somewhat also stars the Stath. Can't blink because you'll miss it, won't you?
It was one of those things, and obviously thank you so much for having us on the show, and I will just warn any listeners and things, if you hear weird sounds in the background, it's because we recently got a puppy and she is starting to settle and things, but we're having to record downstairs in the lounge, so I'm going to try and be clever with my mic muting, but if you hear a couple of cage rattles, it's not in your imagination, listeners.
It's because we've locked someone in the house.
It's not a weird new fetish you're revealing on the show, no? Or...
No, exactly not. But yeah, it's... yeah, and you may hear the puppy whining as well, which is happening right now. I said as soon as we start recording it would be a thing.
Fine.
We'll be fine. But yeah, Collateral, I mean, I'd not even seen it or anything like that.
I did blink and not see Stath.
Yeah.
When it happened, I was like...
Mike was like, I'm pretty sure that was him. And I was like, what?
Because I checked on IMDb, because when people vaguely were talking about in Discord, like when they didn't spoil it or anything, but there was little hints of the Stath's appearance in Collateral, either being really big or really small. So I went on IMDb and I was like, because when I looked up Collateral, I was like, oh, I've never even heard of this film. And it's got Tom Cruise, which it's quite rare to have not heard of a Tom Cruise movie. So went into it and things and IMDb, and I was like, oh, and you're scrolling and you're scrolling and you're scrolling and he's not there. And you're like, okay. So you click see all, and I think he's literally the last person on the whole of IMDb. I was like, is he even in this film? Is it just going to be a cameo? Like, not, but I think, am I right in thinking with back to Filmography, you don't count cameos, or do you?
I don't count uncredited appearances. So Fast and Furious 6, maybe, when he's in it right at the end, the setup is going to be into the antagonist in 7. Like, that won't count because he's uncredited. But here, despite his briefest of briefest appearances, it's on his filmography, so we have to watch it and talk about it.
Yeah, it was. I think his name on IMDb when I really clocked was, he's called Airport Man, and I was like, okay, he hasn't even got a name.
Well, we'll get into it because there's lots of fan theories about it and lots of casting theories, and I think that's probably where we'll have to go for this episode. Like, the film itself, I do really like, but we can't talk about it a lot as a Jason Statham film. Obviously, we can obviously talk about it as being a good film, but there was casting rumors about what he might have done in the film, and then there's been these, like I say, fan theories about what his actual role is within the film compared to other characters he's portrayed previously and following this role too. So I think that's how we'll turn it into enough of a Statham chat, because otherwise we're already done. That's it. We might as well stop the podcast. And
I was going to ask with the back to the filmography thing. I don't know if you don't want to inadvertently spoil your own show, but is this, of all the films apart from the Fast Six, which you I think said was uncredited. Is this the film that he's the least in from? Because you've seen the vast majority of the Statham films, haven't you? So is this the film he's the least in?
It must be, yeah. I mean, like you say, without before we get to the end of this journey, I can't see how he'd been anything any less than this, because even his first role, he was one of the 4 main characters in Lock, Stock. It was the role written for him. So yeah, I think it's a funny thing, isn't it? You're Jason Statham at this point in his career. He's still building. Like, this is his biggest budget and his biggest box office success, which I know we can't put down to him, but he's still building his career. It's only his 9th appearance, and it's Michael Mann, who's previously directed Heat. I mean, like, his other things as well, but Heat was the big success he'd had up until this point, and that was with De Niro and Pacino. It's with Tom Cruise. You don't say no, do you?
No, exactly. That's one of those things. It's kind of weird because him being the front runner in certain movies and then suddenly being such a backseat in this one, and it's just because of the kind of scale of the movie itself. That's one of those weird things about Hollywood. You could be like, probably Kevin Smith movies, I think, are probably a good parallel to that, which is and also certain Adam Sandler movies where it's like, you watch those types of movies, or even Seth Rogen movies, which I got into a lot in my teen years. I was like, oh, everyone knows these actors. They're so famous because they're in every one of these Judd Apatow films. It's like, no, they're in these ones because you work with someone you like, they do a good job, all that sort of stuff. Obviously, Guy Ritchie did that. Wes Anderson does that, but he's got a much bigger thing now. So it's one of those odd things which is like, in a certain circle, in like Kevin Smith, you go, oh yeah, everyone knows all the actors in the Kevin Smith movies, Jason Mewes. You talk to a lot of people who wouldn't class themselves as movie buffs, and they don't even know who Kevin Smith is. Right, yeah. So it's a very long way of me saying rambly nonsense, really. And Megan's laugh is agreed.
Standard.
In terms of this film, though, Megan, you'd seen it, is that right?
This one, no.
No.
What was the one that I have seen?
Do you want us to say what films we've seen?
Let's do it.
We went through IMDb, so... mine's actually incorrect, but there's you've seen 7 out of 54. Are there 54? I went on IMDb but took away 2 for the first 2, but
I've got a count of 41 currently, because I think IMDb counts like everything. So even like you mentioned before we started recording, like music video appearances, which he's obviously got a few, it counts all of those as being part of their filmography. So in terms of like mainstream films where he's credited, at the moment it's 41 with the 2 that are coming out soon. By the time I finish, we'll probably go up to 43.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. I knew because there were 56, I think, on IMDb, but I saw the first 2. One was that Eurasia video, and the other one, so that makes me feel slightly less bad. But there's yours, Megan. I don't know if you can read my writing.
No,
you should be able to read the writing, can't you? Or do you need your glasses?
I've seen Lock, Stock. I have seen Snatch. Before this, I hadn't seen Collateral, but obviously now I have. I've seen The Transporter, but I watched that like years ago. Like, literally the only thing that I can remember about that movie is that there are loads of different number plates. That's it.
That is accurate to that movie, though.
Yeah. I have seen The Pink Panther,
which I won't be covering because he's not credited.
Ah, is he not?
No.
Oh, see, that was on IMDb.
That was.
So as in, like, he's in it, but then there's a little bit in brackets that will say, like, so it's when actors kind of turn up, they have to get paid because you have to, according to the Actors Guild, but they don't really want to. They do it as a favour for a mate usually. So there must be somebody behind the scenes of that movie or in it that he's friends with.
Right. Okay. Interesting. And then I've seen Spy and The Meg.
Oh yes.
Yes. Well, The Meg will be.
They're the ones that I've seen.
At the very least, another appearance of us two. Because I think that might have been one of the first films we went to the cinema to see. No, let's not spoil any of that. Well, that's going to be way down the line. Because I remember when you were organising this and you were asking certain people, what do you want to do? And I was like, I want to be in The Meg. And you're like, can you be in anything a bit sooner? Because that's about 2 years away. And I was like, let's take a look. So Megan, excluding Pink Panther, then Megan's seen 6, including Collateral. And then if you remove Fast and Furious 6, I've only seen 8. So I've seen Lock, Stock as well. I've seen Snatch as well. Obviously, I've seen The Meg as well. And Collateral. I've seen Death Race, which I really liked. I saw it ages ago. I thought it was brilliant. And then I've seen Blitz, which I really didn't like. Really not a fan of Blitz. Yeah.
Scott's coming on to that one, so we'll see.
Yeah, he was quite excited to do it. And Scott is not in any flaw of him, but he's quite critical of movies, which is fine, because a lot of people who are film buffs are critical. I'm kind of a film buff who's quite an apologist. I think being a prequel fan, it just means that I'm very forgiving for most things that happen in movies. And he loved it, and I was like, clearly I've missed something, because I watched that film by myself, and I was like, this is boring. Why is Littlefinger doing this? And then it kind of ended. And then I've seen Fast and Furious up to 8, and obviously he's uncredited, or it's a cameo, or whatever, in 6, post-credit scene, whatever. And then 7 and 8 I've seen. I've not seen Hobbs and Shaw or 9. So I've seen 8, and Megan's seen 6. But you've seen Transporter, which is one of his big...
Yeah, but again, that was a long time ago.
But I haven't even seen that.
I didn't choose it. I was on holiday in France at my mum's friend's house, and my brother wanted to watch it, so we watched it. And yeah, as I said, the only thing that I can remember is something to do with multiple number plates.
One thing that's funny about the Stath is I can't remember what DVD it was. It must have been Star Wars, or no, it wouldn't have been Star Wars. I remember watching a film, maybe it was Watchmen, on DVD, and it had unskippable trailers.
So annoying.
It drives me mental. It's like unskippable cutscenes in video games. It's like, what are you doing? You know, especially when you're playing it again on New Game Plus. Like, I've already seen this. But I remember specifically I've seen the trailer for Crank, and Crank, I think it was just Crank 2, actually. I think I've seen the trailer for that probably about 15 times, and I've never seen the movie. So the main thing I think about with Statham, the first thing I think of is Crank 2 High Voltage. But I've never seen it or anything like that. I didn't even know it was a sequel, because I thought it was like one of those, because the way the trailer is, it's so over the top and stuff. Yeah. It almost felt like it was kind of a joke in itself, calling it Crank 2 High Voltage, almost like the Crank 2 High Voltage. So, yeah, another ramble.
Yeah, I didn't realise there was such a hype about Jason Statham.
You should have said the Stath. That was a perfect opportunity.
Yeah, well, I until
you wanted to,
watched...
but you stopped yourself. I could see.
I hesitated because I feel like I don't deserve it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I until the other day didn't realise that the Stath was a thing. So I feel like I'm not entitled to say it because I don't really care that much.
Well, it's weird because you saw his very beginnings, which he's not quite what, as Jack has slowly been defining over the show as the Stath. But I find he is
when you say the beginning, it's Lock, Stock.
Yeah, that was his first film
But
ever.
Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, that's what it's called, isn't it? And Snatch, again, weren't films that I actively chose to watch.
But they're brilliant though, aren't they?
They were films... Yeah, but we watched one of them recently, didn't we?
Yeah, I rewatched Snatch, I think.
Yeah, I literally have no recollection of what happens, apart from, is it Brad Pitt talks with an accent that I can't understand? Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. Good. That's a good excuse. I love what Megan says she can't remember movies, because it's like, get to watch them again.
It's literally every movie, though.
Apart from Star Wars, Harry Potter, because you see them like so many times.
But yeah, no, I didn't realise that he was such like a big thing.
Well, I was going to say with the Meg, once again, I'm not trying to jump ahead, but with...
Sounds like you are, Michael.
With the Meg, he is...
Full named you there.
I don't call her the... That would be me. I don't call her Meg either. I never call you...
it's because I called you Michael.
You call me Michael. Oh, right. Yeah, that does happen sometimes. Yeah. But I didn't catch that. It's clearly she does it so often. It's just like normal for me. Also, I hear Mike. I hear the first half of my name and tune out the rest. But with the Meg, it's... In that film, he's kind of the most Statham almost for me, in a way of like, he's got his career known almost as the Stath, as you've been defining in the show. And then by that point, he's like a parody of himself, which is why I loved it so much. But Megan had no experience of that, even though she really liked it. So that's going to be
I just wanted to say it because it's my name.
That is literally, she saw the trailer, I was like, it's my name, let's go watch it. And I was like, you want to watch a giant shark film with Jason Statham? She's like, yeah. I was like, I didn't think I'd ever be able to convince you to go to the cinema for that.
I'm the Meg.
Yeah, we won't say what we think about it.
Anyway, you're taking us off on a tangent.
I'm sorry, it's not even my show.
No,
but I mean, we're here for the tangents, and we're here to hear you two. That's the point.
What do you think? Like the Stath, do you have any opinions on him as an actor or anything? Do you even vaguely remember who he is?
Yeah, I know he's bald. He's like he's tall.
Not in every film.
He's tall, stocky, and he's bald, isn't he? He's like really muscly.
He's pretty. I think he's more very, very chiseled because like really muscly. I think like The Rock.
I'm picturing like The Rock.
The Rock with Jason Statham's head.
Yeah.
To be fair, like the two of them are the only two, really, like we've had this discussion on the show, the only two kind of action heroes we've got now. So for you to be putting them in the same category is totally correct. They're the only two that really carry on that tradition that we had in the 80s and the 90s of these kind of, like you said it, Mike, these people who almost kind of play themselves, play like a variation on this character they've created. And I think The Rock and the Stath, they're both get the definitive article.
Yeah,
they do that.
That's him and the Meg. So I was showing Megan a picture of him.
He's pretty ripped.
He is very ripped.
I know that some people go bloody nuts for him.
He's a very good-looking chap.
Like there are people that I've spoken to at work, and like Jason Statham is their like
number one.
Then their number one person that they find attractive out of everyone.
To be fair, I think he's also like a really nice guy. Like he plays as a hard man a lot of the time, but there's not really, from my recollection, there's never any controversy with him. A lot of time you get someone who plays a hard man, like Vin Diesel, and there's a lot of things that buzz around. He's a bit of an asshole.
He's English, isn't he?
Yeah.
When I think of Jason Statham, I just think of like a Cockney accent,
which is correct, but weird considering he's not from there. He's like from Norfolk, and he's from, I can't remember where he was born, but then he moved to like Norfolk and went to school with Vinnie Jones, and who knows where this Cockney accent came from.
Whenever I hear Jason Statham, I hear him saying his name, but I don't think he's ever said his name. But I just hear him go, Jason Statham, with an F, not with a TH. But
absolutely.
I don't think he's ever said that. I don't think I've ever heard him say his name, especially not his full name, unless it's maybe an interview, but I don't think I've watched any interviews with him, so I don't know where it's come from, this weird Jason Statham stuff. Maybe it's just his charming looks.
Yeah, but...
Well, it's part of that character he's created, isn't it? So I was just looking at now as you guys are talking, so he's from Derbyshire, and then he moved to, I think it was like Suffolk or Norfolk, and then suddenly he's in Guy Ritchie movies playing this Cockney gangster type guy. But it's stuck with him, isn't it? He's kept that accent since somebody told him to stop trying to be American, which you've experienced, Megan, in Transporter, with his core blimey.
Yeah, no. I have experienced it, but I don't recall.
Mike is right, though. You've hit really interesting points in his career, because Lock, Stock and Snatch, he was a guy finding his feet and learning how to be an actor. Transporter is the first proper The Stath movie, where it's like, I'm a badass, I can fight, I'm bald. And then the Meg, as you said, Mike, is kind of this like almost a parody, almost a caricature of the role that he's now fallen and become really comfortable in. And what I like on top of all of these things that we've already said is that he just owns it. I think that's what I like about him. He doesn't care. He has fun. He's like, my life is bloody great. I get to show off my skills every day. He tries to do most of his own stunts as much as he's allowed. I get to do martial arts. I get to star in films. Like, he's got no complaints really, and he doesn't care that it's like he's almost typecast now. He's like, well, why would I care? Like, I'm still doing something I love.
Yeah. I also like it when people do their own stunts. When you hear that people do their own stunts, I think that's nice. Like,
with Tom Cruise, right into this film, he does so many of his own stunts.
Yeah, and Chris Pratt wanted to do a lot of his own stunts in a lot of stuff. I like it when the actor takes like the onus of that role and wants to do as much as they can with it.
Well, I was going to say, one comparison I haven't heard on the show yet, and I've listened to every episode, so...
Thank you, sir.
Unless the one that's been recorded, because obviously the last one, as of recording this, am I allowed to...
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Transport, I think, was the last one that was released, so there's, I think, one or two between that from here to
the
there.
Italian Job, between...
Right, there we go. So, if someone said that in this, then that makes it sound like I was just listening to another podcast and didn't. But he's almost like our Keanu Reeves, in a weird way. Because Keanu Reeves, in his earliest career, you got Bill and Ted and that sort of stuff, and he did like a rom-com or two. But then he just, when he became famous enough, he has never been any controversy. He's always been a lovely person. Everyone loves Keanu Reeves, especially the recent in internet days. Recently, he's just boomed. But from about 15, probably about Matrix actually, so probably about 20 years ago now, from that point, he was just like, I don't really need to prove myself as an actor in this. I just love, and you hear how passionate he is when he talks in interviews, Keanu Reeves. He's like, he loves his own stunts. He loves action movies. And he loves the term from John Wick is gung fu. So is shooting and do martial arts, that sort of stuff. And it's like, when you watch a Keanu Reeves movie now, you watch John Wick or you watch any of these sort of other ones, you know exactly what you're going to get. And because he does all his own stunts as well, and there's no controversy, I'm only now making that connection that Statham is almost like our little Keanu. Obviously, personality-wise, they've actually got a lot of similarities, but I don't think that's a connection I've ever even considered or heard anyone make. They're both actually quite similar, because Keanu's almost... He's not quite the action hero like The Rock is, or Statham is to that degree. He's almost like... kind of like a martial... Not quite a martial arts hero, but he kind of is. He's like an action... but not a martial artist. You know, I'm kind of waffling, but Megan's nodding.
No, it is an interesting comparison, and it isn't one that's been made, so you can claim that one. That's definitely 100% yours. First in. No, I like that, and I think he is another person, as you said, who does like to do as much as he can. I agree with you, Megan. I think it's important in terms of adding a sense of place and time and verisimilitude of it feeling real. When an actor wants to do that, I think we should honour what stunt people do as well, because what they do is amazing. You know, in Raiders of the Lost Ark, that's one of my favourite movies, and you've got Indiana Jones being dragged under the truck. Just not going to get Harrison Ford, A, to do that, and B, you're not going to be allowed to do that. So you need that stuntman who's willing to. But I agree with you. When there's people like Stath, Cruise, Keanu Reeves, I didn't know that about Chris Pratt, people who are willing to go that extra mile to make that scene look realistic. That's really important.
It's one of those things with Tom Cruise where, because of the whole Scientology stuff, you know, and I've seen a few documentaries on Scientology, and it's obviously got some very clear problems with it, but most religions do, so I'm not going to delve into that. But I really wanted to dislike him because of the whole Scientology stuff and the issues with the church. But every person, and Simon Pegg is someone who I really respect, obviously because it's based in the Collateral trilogy and everything. And obviously he wrote the last 3 Mission Impossible films, or at least co-wrote them, was involved in the production in some way other than just being an actor. And he said in interviews, people have asked him, what's Tom Cruise like? And he's like, Tom Cruise is one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. He meets everyone on set. He learns everyone's names. He remembers things about you. If you just say an offhand comment, he looks you in the eyes. He's very polite. He's very professional. He's a phenomenal actor and everything. And it's like, I want to... This sounds bad, but it's almost like I want to dislike you because of the association with this problematic organisation. But every single other part of your life, excluding the couple of crazy TV appearances he did in, you know, decades ago, he's a brilliant actor. He's in some brilliant movies. He does some of his own stunts. And I watched the behind the scenes thing of something from Mission Impossible where he was attached with a harness, but it was on either a plane or a helicopter taking off. He was climbing on the side of it, and he literally did that. And the only thing is they CGI'd out his harness thing that was connected to the thing with it. And you're like, that is bananas. And you hear Tom Cruise in interviews and he's like, I just love action movies, and the more I can do myself, the more I feel in it, and the more passionate I am. And I'm just like, echoing what Megan said, it's just one of those things where I really respect them, because, you know, being an actor is not necessarily easy, but you get, for the most part, the top end ones get overpaid for it. But when you hear someone, regardless of whether or not you still think they're overpaid, they're really trying as hard as they can to do everything possible to make the movie experience and their own better, and they're really passionate about it. It makes me more passionate about them as well. It makes me want to love their movies more, which I think Statham does as well.
Yeah.
that was the equivalent of, it's all right.
Yeah.
This is what I mean. This is whenever I come onto these podcasts, people are like, yeah, we want to listen to Megan. And I'm like, but I don't understand why, because the majority of the time it is one-word answers. They're like, what do you think? Yeah, it's all right.
Because you have... The thing is, the problem is I verbally waterboard people. And in amidst all of that sort of waterfall of vocals and words, there's little nuggets of things that are quite cool or interesting and stuff. Whereas with you, it's kind of the opposite. You don't say as much as I do, but almost everything you say is precise and somewhat insightful or very funny. So you're just like I'm the raw, uncut version, and you're the
Schneider cut.
Schneider. Rob Schneider cut.
That's his name, isn't
Snyder.
it? Oh, whatever.
It's Rob Schneider. The Rob Schneider cut. That's a film I'd like to see.
Shut up.
I in between I release fortnightly, and in between I always do like a little audio clip of the previous episode. So I already timestamp what we've just had. All it's going to be is Megan going, yeah. That's going to be that entire like. Make sure you tune in this week for the discussion of Collateral. Yeah. We don't need anything else. That's it. That's all we need.
One thing I find funny about your show as well is whenever you say mic, camera, mic, Lights, camera, action. Mike, what you
haven't broken.
You haven't listened to this podcast, so it sounds like I'm talking nonsense. At the start of his show, he says, instead of lights, camera, action,
yeah,
Jack says 3 other things, but one of the things he says is Mike. So every time I start the podcast, there's a second gap, and I hear Mike, and I'm like, what? Every single time. It's terrible. That's what I was trying to say. But I kept catching myself up. And then
you kept hearing Mike and keep thinking somebody was talking to you, didn't you?
I hear it in the microphone, and I'm like, oh, someone's saying my name. Oh, what? I'm like Doug from Up when someone with Squirrel. That's me with my own name, which is not helpful having one of the most common names on the planet. But there you go.
Anyway,
I know we were waiting for the air to be filled by a Megan nugget then, weren't we?
I was about to say yep again. The classic Megan nuggets.
So Mike, I just want to see what would happen. It mentioned watching Collateral, Megan, and you went, all right.
Yeah.
And then you watched it.
Yeah.
And let's put the Stath aside for a minute. We'll come back to him. I think that was a really nice intro and opening on the Stath. We'll come back to his whole 1 minute of screen time. Initial thoughts on the film itself?
Yeah, it was all right. No, yeah, I actually quite liked it. I thought it was quite interesting. I thought it was smart. I did think at times it was a bit like slow. I think is the word that I'll use. But as a film, I thought it was quite good. It was an interesting concept. But yeah, I also just think it was kind of like marginally unrealistic at the same time, which kind of like dips it a little bit for me because I'm not a massive fan of films that are like overly weird, or like not very I mean, it sounds ridiculous because I love Harry Potter and obviously I love Star Wars as well, which they're not realistic, but because this is in our world, it just seems very over the top. So at points I was like, come on. But I did enjoy the film.
Yeah, you're like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I was literally about to defend you and you defended yourself that they are set worlds, and as long as they live within their own rules they establish, then you can accept it. So I get what you mean, because this is based in reality, and is aiming to look real. Like the look of the film, the cinematography is aiming to represent like this could be a normal night in LA. This could have happened last night. Yeah, it's a fair comment.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed this because I've tried to start rating things on IMDb now. Sometimes out of protest, because I watch a film and go, that was amazing. What's it on IMDb? 6? I'd only give it an 8, but I'm going to give it a 10 to boost those numbers up. So I didn't quite do that with Collateral. I think I gave it like a 7, but it was one of those films where we both kind of said 7.5-ish. I think we were kind of, I'd agree with basically everything Megan said. There were parts that just felt like parts could have been cut a bit. It felt like, I wouldn't necessarily say slow, but there was a couple of scenes that occurred, and the scene itself goes on for almost too long. It felt like another editor needs to come in and just kind of trim the fat in a sense, just a few minutes off a scene here and there. I thought the action was good. Obviously, Cruise was great, so was Jamie Foxx and things, and Mark Ruffalo as well. But it was, I think, the main scene where it kind of went a bit off the rails was when, because it felt like it was all going to be very grounded and realistic, like Megan kind of was saying, and I was like, oh, the concept's really good, and it's, hitman and a taxi driver. It's not necessarily that unique, but it's kind of is intriguing. You're like, oh, they could do quite a lot of cool things with this. And for the first half, it's like, this is exactly what I kind of wanted, is them trying to escape and getting away. And then halfway through, it's just kind of blown open, and then there's like a full-on shootout, and I was like, eh. And then Megan kept saying, why do they not get rid of the taxi? And obviously it's because they had the body in, but it was how the police kept not getting them for so long. And you're like, how many taxis with broken windshields are there?
This is the thing, like, in my head, as soon as that taxi had a body in it, just leave the taxi. Or just destroy the taxi, do something to the taxi. You've got a dead body in the back, you have, like, a shattered windscreen, and you've got blood on the car. Like, he's obviously got Is this a spoiler one, or is it not spoiler?
No, yes, full spoilers. Just
Okay. So obviously he's got this massive list of people that he needs to kill, doesn't he? So, like, by that logic, why would you be driving around in a vehicle that's like not
incognito.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
It's very glaring. It's a glaring issue there.
It's really interesting. I'll do a little bit of fence sitting because obviously, same as you guys, do some reading around it. And I used to have a really big issue with the ending, which I'm sure we can come on to. But through doing some more research on it, I think it's been explained to me in a way that I'm happy to accept. But in terms of what you're saying, the sense of like incognito, I like that word, of like he should be more hidden. He's theoretically, or it seems like he's one of the best hitmen in the world, right? He's been called in to this really special job. But I think you come to learn through the movie that Vincent, the Tom Cruise character, I wouldn't say he has a death wish, but I think he enjoys that thrill, doesn't he? There's a little look in his eye, like in that club fever scene you were talking about before. There's a little moment that Cruise gives you where he's kind of like, yeah, this is the shit I'm really down for. Like his night's been boring up until this point. It's been too easy for him. So I don't know if he's almost inviting on a little bit more danger. It may be something I've read into it myself. It's not something I think I particularly read, from the director, from Cruise or anything. I don't know. There just seems to be a little bit of like he is a character seems to come more alive the longer the movie goes on. So I wonder if he was a bit bored with his life, or
that's a fair point. And it's funny because we're actually watching Buffy at the moment. Obviously, you're one of the season's greetings, gentlemen. No spoilers, because we're on series 6. So we're, I've seen it before, so I know what's coming down.
We're getting near the end, but I don't know anything that happens.
And obviously, our dog is named after a certain character in that, but I can't say their name. I think Jack can, but if I say it, then that certain little creature will wake up.
Oh, you mean Willow?
Yes. And so, we both love Buffy and things, but there's a point in the show, which we just kind of passed a little bit, where there's a point where Buffy doesn't really want to live anymore. And she's kind of got that thing where she's throwing herself into certain situations and being a lot more reckless because she's kind of almost like, I don't care if I live or die. And I think it's weird watching this at that time, where there's that, you saying that's kind of clicked with me. I'm like, that does actually sound like it would make sense. But I would also say with this film, was this in New York or LA? Or it was LA, yeah. LAPD was Mark Ruffalo fanning. I've not ever been to LA, but from what I understand, is it ever actually that empty? Because I was past where you've got the taxi driving, and there's literally not a car on the road, and you're like,
the thing is that LA is pretty big,
right?
LA is massive, so Los Angeles.
Because you've been,
I have been to LA. It is huge. So you've obviously got that one area, but then there's areas within that area. So, but I don't know.
Well, it just seemed like it was in one of the more built up places, especially towards the end. And there's the car crash scene. And
that is sort of 4 o'clock in the morning, I think, at that point, isn't it?
Oh, is it? Oh, that might explain it a bit. But even then, I would have, even in a city like that, because we live in Southampton, which is not quite London or that thing, but it's quite densely populated for a UK city. And even at 4 a.m, you still see something. There's normally, you see a vehicle or two, and it was just that car crash scene. And it's 2, 4 or 5 lanes on either side of the road sort of thing. And he completely wipe out, and not a single vehicle was seen for about 10 minutes when the police comes by and all that stuff. And I'm like, I know it's a film, and it's kind of one of those things you just have to kind of go, oh, that road was just really busy, just really empty. It was not a very popular road. But there are tiny moments like that which I think weaken the film a little bit, where it just feels like if this film was a bit tighter, if you had maybe I don't know who the director is,
Michael Mann.
Oh, you said it earlier, didn't you? Heat. But if it had someone, this is just my personal preference, almost like James Cameron in the sense of how anal and specific about details they are, or maybe to some degree Tarantino. I don't know. The film would be completely different if it was Tarantino, but like a director that is so keen on the details, I feel like this film could have been held in very, very high regard, because I think at its core and the vast majority of the elements work really well. There's just a couple of moments or a couple of scenes that just take you out a little bit, and I think that might be why. You'd never heard this film, had you?
No,
we'd never heard of it. So it was like, that's one of the reasons I chose it. I was like, never heard of this. Well, I checked on IMDb to make sure it wasn't like a 2 out of 10. Well, actually, if it was a 2, I'd have watched it. If it was a 5, I probably would have chose something else. Yeah.
No, it's really interesting that I'd never picked up on that before. So that's something for me to think about and process. And next time I watch it, I'll have that in mind. I think, funnily enough, Michael Mann is quite an obsessive compulsive director. He's not quite Fincher levels of, 70, 80 takes.
Yeah.
But he is somebody who asks quite a lot of his actors in terms of rehearsal and performance and takes to get it to the right point. And also, I've never been to LA, so I can't comment either. Like, we'll take Megan's word on it as somebody who's been there and knows. This was celebrated when it came out in terms of its depiction of LA because it was showing it as being a real place rather than, when you get like the film goes to Paris, here's the Eiffel Tower. It doesn't do the Hollywood sign. It doesn't do all the usual spots that anywhere would do. It does the back streets. It does the grimy. It does the, the strange, like Mexican cowboy club and all these other parts of LA that you don't really think about being there and don't exist. This film chose to show those. So I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying what I've read is right.
To their opinion.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's really interesting that those are the things for you felt drew you out, and it can still be flawed even if it's him trying to depict LA in a different way. It doesn't mean that he's done that completely right.
Yeah, I think the car crash and maybe somewhat the ending and the kind of there's the things which is plot armor, which happens in this quite a lot. Where you've got Tom Cruise in a shootout and he basically comes out completely unscathed, and it's a bit like the action scenes. It was a bit choppy inside that shootout in the club thing, and for about 30 seconds, I was like, "What the fuck is going on?" But that's just a lot of action.
Because also there's the bit where he shoots loads of people, and obviously he's just shot a load of people in that club, and then he just walks out.
Yeah,
like just everyone's screaming around him, and there's chaos, and then he's just walking out like nothing's happened. I'm like, how has a bouncer not tackled him to the ground? Like, obviously he's just killed a load of people, but there must be other people that are like watching this, and he's just strolling out. The
police are there, aren't they? Because R.I.P.
We'll get to that in a second. I think that's a really interesting point of this movie, and again, something we'll cycle back to is the casting of Tom Cruise. Like, it's really hard to cast him in anything because he brings Star Wattage, right? He brings the Cruise smile, and they try to downplay that here. I don't think he's Tom Cruisey at all in terms of what you'd expect him to be in his performance style. But also, like, his styling is like, he's the grey man, isn't he? Like, his hair's grey, his beard's grey, his suit's grey.
I didn't recognize him at first.
Right. Okay.
I recognized the actor, and I was like, "Who is that?" And Mike was like, "It's Tom Cruise," and I was like, "Oh, okay then." I was like, "All right, fine."
I thought he looked like obviously Tom Cruise is a very attractive man anyway. He's very handsome, but like when I saw him with the silver hair, I was like, "You can't make this man look bad." Apart from in Tropic Thunder, I was like, "You cannot make this guy look bad." He's just with grey hair. I'd argue he almost looks better, and it's just like, this guy. That's what I thought when I saw him.
I agree. I think that's the biggest issue of this movie, is that he's meant to blend. So backing up what you guys were saying about, he's leaving the club and he's sort of blending in. You get Tom Cruise doesn't blend in anyway. It doesn't matter what style you put him in, even when he's all grey, he doesn't blend. So yeah, I agree. I think that's an issue with the movie.
Yeah, but I will clarify, because I do this quite a lot on podcasts. I'm very critical of movies, and then at the end I'll go, I bloody loved it.
Yeah.
Did you? Like all the Star Wars podcasts I've done about all the Star Wars movies, I just shredded Star Wars for ages. And it's like, no, they're some of my favourite movies, but flawed. But I suppose that when you've got something you really like, you can only kind of say, this bit was amazing. And everyone goes, yes, it was. I like how that happened. And then the criticisms, especially when everyone doesn't always believe the same exact thing, which is one of the reasons I love this show. I love movie podcasts when they've got the right theme. But with yours, I'm really enjoying every time it comes out. It's one of my favourite podcasts to listen to, especially even when I haven't even seen the film. Anyway, I'm just... Vegas, give me the look again.
I'm not looking at you any particular way.
I'm just
when he's in full complimentary mode, we don't need the look or the full Michael. That's fine. Let him go.
I love the show. I think it's a brilliant, very clever idea. Even if you just say my name. That's probably why I like it so much, because I hear my name at the start of every podcast. I'm like, oh, same to me, isn't it?
Let's talk about Fanning, because you mentioned it. What do you think of Ruffalo in the role? So he's the cop. He's kind of on the dogged cop on the trail. And I think it's another thing. I'll cycle back to something you guys said before. I don't know why I'm saying cycle back a lot today. It's in my head, obviously.
Taxi back.
Yeah, taxi back. Thank you. That this is quite tropey, this movie. I don't think you said it's not unique. I agree, Mike. It's not unique at all. In fact, I think it's purposefully playing with genre tropes of kind of cop movies and noir and and Fanning is that dogged cop on the trail. What did you think of him and his performance, and then what they chose to do with him?
Because you like Ruffalo, don't you?
I do like Ruffalo. I have a particular fondness towards Mark Ruffalo. Yeah, he had like that accent, and I was like, "Is Mark Ruffalo like?" I was like, "Is he Italian?" And then I was like, in my head, then I had this whole thing, and I was like, "I need to look it up online." I was like, "Is Mark Ruffalo Italian?" And he is. So
okay.
I
think his dad.
His heritage is Italian. He's got Italian
his dad is full Italian. Both his parents are, but I think his mum was. Like
French Italian or something.
Yeah,
or something
so he's
else.
like 3/4 Italian.
But he had like that accent in this film. I liked his character. I think he was a good character, and it made me sad that he got shot.
It happened so quickly as well. That was like almost
it was
the Statham appearance.
Well, that's the thing, is that it was like, oh yeah, this guy, the taxi driver, finally has like a little glimpse. What's his name? Max.
Mm-hmm. I've written it down there, but yes.
Yeah, well, yeah. It's like, so Max, I was like, he has this glimpse. This guy believes that he's not done anything wrong. He's protecting him. He gets him out. And then Vincent's like, pow, pow, pow. And then he's like, oh, well, I saved your life. He's like, well, no, actually, you just fucked everything up. He made everything worse again. Yeah, it was a shame. He wasn't in it for nearly long enough. I really liked his character.
I think his character. I mean, I think all the actors in this are stellar. Like all of, I would say that in this film, for me personally, I never felt like any of the acting brought the film down. None of that brought me out of it. Everyone from the smaller roles, Javier Bardem and Jada Pinkett Smith to a degree, but then Ruffalo and Jamie Foxx. It's Jada Pinkett.
It's Jada Pinkett Smith. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who is she? What's she in this?
The only woman in the whole film.
She's the lawyer.
Who's Javier Bardem?
Huh?
Who's that?
Javier Bardem?
No, I know who he is, but was he in the film?
He was the club owner who, when Max went into the club and had to pretend to be Vincent, he was the guy he was talking to.
Oh my god, I'm literally useless. I'm like, honestly,
It was funny because with Ruffalo, I didn't recognise him at first because he looked so different. He's got the facial hair and I think shaved head or very short hair.
It's all slicked back, isn't it, his hair?
Yeah, it's very greasy.
Yeah, but I really liked Ruffalo's character, and that scene where he gets him and he believes him, I was like, oh, this is where things are going to go.
But it is also tropey, as Jack said, because it's like, oh, the guy that understands, the guy that has like an inkling that something else is going on, he's on the trail, he's got it. Oh, obviously, he's going to get shot and he's going to die because he's the only one that understands the situation, actually.
And I think that with
this...
his
colleague just went home, didn't he? He was like, I'm tired, I'm going to bed.
He did, yeah.
Because the FBI started taking over and he's just like the LA detective who his job is his life and he can't let it go. I felt when he died, I was like, oh, that sucks. But this is where the film is really going to ramp up. This is where the film's. But for me, it did the opposite. I was like, oh, this is where everything's going to come together, and it was just like the FBI stuff just kind of slowly disappeared into the distance. And especially, I know we'll get onto the ending, but it was just a bit like, there's no. I thought the whole thing of this film was Max was terrified of the FBI getting him and blaming him for all this, and then it just either I missed something or. But it was like Fanning with his glimmering hope, and then Fanning died. And oh no, Max is going to get caught up in this, and he's going to try and convince the FBI. And there's going to be, but then it just kind of went, the FBI aren't really in it anymore. And it was like there's a car crash, and there's a police officer there, which I liked the police officer interaction with Max. And then
that was interesting. I liked that bit.
Yeah, and when the building scene, the start of it was really good, but then once again it just kind of went on for a while, and then the ending happens, and then you're just like, so did the FBI? What, did they find his body on a train and then just leave it? Because if I was Max, in all honesty, I'd be like, well, they already got my face. They've already got everything about me. I would be hobbling Tom Cruise's body or Vincent's body.
What happened at the end?
Well, they both shot each other at the same time, and Max was completely unscathed, and Vincent got shot in like the stomach, and then he sat on the chair.
And then it literally just abruptly ends, doesn't it?
Well, they just leave him on the train.
Yeah,
they leave him on the train, and he walks off with Jada Pinkett Smith's character Annie, and then the train goes off and it ends, and I'm like,
I don't remember.
Why would you leave his body there? If I was Max and I was trying to prove the fact I'm not an armed killer, although he did just kill him, I would be like basically pulling Tom Cruise's body off the train, and I'd be trying to call police, being like, this is the guy who's been killing everyone. If with his body going off on the train, disappearing, surely 10 minutes after this film ended, he's just gonna be found.
Well, but I mean, the person that he's helped out is a defense attorney, isn't she? So. He has her on her side.
Very good point.
He can just be like, well, I've got one of the best defense attorneys in LA here. He's going to back me up that this guy tried to kill us. So
yeah, well, I suppose also I imagine the shootout scene maybe I feel like this is why I say that maybe the detail orientated stuff. I'm not sure if I've seen many other Michael Mann films. I haven't seen Heat, but it was one of those weird things where there's a lot of parts of this that the details line up and it wraps up in a clever way. And when it turned out that Annie was his last target, I was like, oh, that's clever, that's good. That's the part I was like, oh, this is where the film's going to really. But there's just little things where I just feel like, oh, if there was 1 minute long scene, 30 seconds of an FBI agent going, those two people who just went in the club and came out, and that guy, maybe just a bit of CCTV from across the road saw him kill Fanning, and then go, oh, we've got the wrong guy. He was telling the truth, or Fanning was right. Even just a line of dialogue, Fanning was right. And then you'd go, okay, the FBI washes away, but it just kind of didn't. And then they just left the body on a train, which I thought was really bizarre.
Well, there's loads to unpack here. You guys have given me so much information to deal with. No, I really like what you're saying, because I think the Fanning death is that almost like end of the cliche, isn't it? I think that's where like you're not going to get the dogged cop and the hitman assassin shootout at the end. You're not going to get him tracking him down and believing in Max, and they kill him off really quick. I'm going to be really careful what I say here. Have you seen No Country for Old Men?
I have, and I love it.
No, I haven't.
It's on our scratch off film list.
And I won't say much more than that. It has echoes. Those two films echo in this way for me, where you think you're going to get something and you don't, and that can be really frustrating, I think, as a viewer, when you think you're going to get this epic face-off. The film is building to something, and then it doesn't happen because of almost something that happens off screen. Like Fanning is just, as you said, it's like a couple of seconds, bang, 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 and he's done and he's down. And they're quite grim in the way. I think they show him like twitching and dying, don't they? I agree with you, Mike, in terms of like the building. I love the shot of Max, like on the top of the parking lot, looking up into the windows. Yeah. And you see Annie on the floor above Vincent, because he's gone to her office, but actually she's in the library. And you getting the almost like horror movie vibe. It's like a stalker movie, and you're seeing him silhouetted through the glass panels, aren't you, in that scene? But I can kind of see what you mean, how it might go on a bit long. They could have sped that up a little bit, because we're getting to that final scene where Max has to step up and be the everyman that can do something to save the day. Go on. I
think that bit specifically I really liked. I thought that was done expertly. I just think once Vincent was in the same room, she was crawling on the floor in the dark for ages, and I was a bit like, we don't even really need to see her crawling in the floor for more than 1 second. You just get the gist of, he turned the lights off, which was a genius idea, and I was like, that reinforces him being a great hitman. I was like, good shout, that makes sense. And he didn't just go in and flip a switch. He had to use a proper, axe to hit a padlock off several times. Like, those details line up. That makes sense. But then it was like, oh, and now he's just in the room with her, and he's kind of, it just felt a bit messy-ish. Because you're just like, well, so he just wants to try and kill her in the dark, but he has no special skills. He doesn't have night vision goggles. He doesn't have a torch. He just turned the lights off to stop her calling. Fair enough. And then he just kind of vaguely wanders around in the room. And he's claims to be one of the best hitmen ever. And he's just kind of stumbling in the darkness with her. And that was a bit, I was like, oh, okay. And then it just went on for a while. That's
why I think he's becoming a bit unhinged by this point in the movie. Because you look at him at the start when he kills the first guy and he falls out the window and hits a taxi. It's all clinical. And he doesn't, it's all really quick and over and done with. But by here, he's kind of having fun, I think. Because you have the first scene in the Mexican club, don't you, when Max goes in and meets the Javier Bardem character, and they have a brief conversation, and Vincent's just sat in the cab, isn't he? But it's the second scene, as we've spoken about before, in Club Fever, where it's the big shootout, and that's when he takes out loads of the FBI guys. So I think they're probably busy dealing with all their wounded and dead, and the main FBI guy gets shot in the leg. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, the old dude, wasn't it?
Yeah, he's like a Michael Mann regular in some of the other movies. So I think probably they're distracted by the shootout and all of that, which is why they kind of disappear from the movie, to play devil's advocate again a little bit. But I think he's becoming unhinged by this point. He's like kind of reveling in what he's doing, which is why I'm not saying that excuses it dragging out. I think if it drags out for you, it drags out. And that's a criticism that needs to be leveled at the movie. But I think in terms of what Vincent as a character is doing, that's why he's not being quite as professional at this point. And I love the scene when he smashes the window with the chair to chase after her, and then he trips over the chair.
I didn't see him trip.
Yeah, he like smashes the window, he throws it, doesn't he? Then he trips over and stumbles and goes after her,
right.
Which is one of those famous like behind the scene things, a bit like Raiders again, to talk about that, where like that wasn't meant to happen. It was meant to be a smash and he's meant to chase after her really quickly. they liked the shot so much because it showed this kind of different sense to him of him not quite being in control, that they decided to use that shot in the movie.
That's fair.
Cool.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I feel like maybe for me, I didn't actually get the vibe he was becoming that unhinged.
No,
so
fair.
I feel like personally, if they had leaned into that more, because I love characters becoming unhinged. It's one of my, it's probably why I like episode 3 of Star Wars so much, which is like unhinged to the 10th degree.
God, always talking about bloody Star Wars.
How I roll. I've got it on my skin. I literally can't look anywhere in life without seeing it in some capacity. But it's one of those things where I love seeing a character become unhinged. Obviously, Breaking Bad is probably the poster child for that sort of thing. So I didn't personally get that. I just got it. I was like, he was an amazing hitman, and he was just kind of getting worse.
Do you know one bit that I really liked, but at the same time really didn't, was when Max is breaking into, it's a law building, isn't it? Yeah. Where he like throws the bin at the thing and it doesn't break, which made me laugh. But then what annoyed me is that he used 2 bullets to break the glass to get into the building. I was like, why would you waste a bullet? You're literally going in to save this woman that you've spoken to and like kind of want to go on a date with, from this guy that is like essentially, well, he's a hitman, but like he's a murderer. Why would you waste a bullet? Why would you waste that second bullet?
Well, I have a defense for that, and my thoughts was he's so inexperienced with firearms. When you shoot a gun, you get kickback. So I kind of viewed it. Now, I don't know when watching it, I thought that, and that's such a almost offhand thing. Yet with the Tom Cruise tripping and lots of these other semi-intentional details, I've ignored all these other ones and picked up this one thing. I've just been like, yeah, maybe he just
it's probably because
he shot once and it was kind of like a ooh do sort of thing.
I pointed it out, didn't I? It was the first thing that I said after it happened. I was like, why would he do the second bullet? Why would he waste it?
And I was like, I don't know, kickback maybe, or just to show he's so inexperienced with firearms. But I liked his character, and again with the detail thing, I liked how he said at the start, I'm going to be, it's just temporary, that sort of thing. And some of my favourite parts is, I think the dialogue is some of my favourite parts of this, which might be why the ending was a bit weaker for me, because I just found when, Jamie Foxx in this is phenomenal. I don't think I've seen Jamie Foxx, I don't think I've seen him do a properly bad role. I think his weakest role is probably Spider-Man, but I like Amazing Spider-Man too, so. But
yeah, he's like the electric guy, isn't he?
Electro, yeah. But I don't blame him for the issues with that film, but I still enjoy it. But I think the way he plays his character is so good, like Jamie Foxx. Like, everything I see him in is amazing, but I really like their conversations. And there's the bit when Max, Jamie Foxx, puts his foot down and does the crash. That before that is such brilliant dialogue, and I love that they're trying to somewhat figure each other out in a way. And I love that with Max is kind of, this film is almost like his. I've got a theory of what this film is kind of trying to show, but it's almost like it's like a midlife crisis. It's like a epiphany. It's this thing where my comparison, I made a note of it, is almost like I feel like this film is a metaphor for someone who's an introvert getting an extroverted friend, where you when you're an introvert, and obviously I'm an extrovert, so I do this to a lot of my friends, and to Megan to some degree, is the extrovert wants to be out and doing things, action, high intensity things, to a degree in social situations, whereas the introvert wants more control, wants to not necessarily be thrown into a very intense social situation immediately. But if you have 2 people, one who's an introvert, one who's an extrovert, the introvert usually brings the extrovert down a bit, and the introvert pushes. They kind of balance each other out to a degree. I know I'm the terms of introvert and extrovert I'm kind of stretching quite a lot, but that general idea of what people are like, and I kind of felt it with those.
Well, you're kind of seeing like a positive and a negative correlation with the character arcs, aren't you? Like, as the film goes on, Vincent becomes like, well, as Jack said, like less hinged, so more unhinged, whereas Max is becoming more like confident, isn't he? He's becoming he's standing up for himself, like, so they're like kind of like, I know people who are listening to this can't see what I'm doing with my hands, but if you've got like a graph, you would have like Vincent's going on to a negative correlation, whereas like Max's would be going to a positive. So they kind of would like meet in the middle and then pass each other. Yeah,
exactly. And I think that's one of the things that I got the introvert extrovert thing. I was kind of like, for me, that's how it felt. It was they're bringing each other out of their kind of own extremes in a certain way. But then when they kind of meet in the middle, they realise almost they're not compatible, obviously, in a lot of ways. And, obviously Tom Cruise is a sociopath or psychopath. I think probably sociopath, but I'm always a bit hazy on the differences. But that's kind of how I interpreted their relationship. I like that the two different sides of the coin and kind of learning from each other, even if they didn't want to, and being put in situations they didn't want to be in a way.
I think that also excuses, I completely agree. I think that also excuses part of the reason why Vincent doesn't ditch Max. He really likes him. And he feels like he's a good influence on him. He likes being around him. And they've had that interaction with Max's boss over the radio, haven't they? Where he was like bullying Max, and he helped Max stand up for himself. And so I think the actors have got great chemistry as well. So it sells all of this, where again, this is probably part of that stuff you were talking about, Megan, where like, it doesn't really line up with what would happen in reality. Vincent would have left long ago, just shot Max in the head and walked off.
Yeah.
But in the terms of this movie, and because we want to see these characters stay together, and there is some character progression for both of them due to their burgeoning relationship, you could almost imagine a sequel, a buddy comedy where like Vincent's going to go off and do a job, and Max is like, "No, come on, Vincent, we're past all that now." And you could like. And he's like trying to get to stay home and use his skills somewhere new. I think certainly by the end, despite the horrendous experience he's been through, Max is a changed man for the better because of this time he spent with Vincent, definitely.
And once again, kudos to Jamie Foxx, because I know he listens to this podcast. Thanks, Jamie. His range as an actor, you see it in the moment, and it's one of my favourite scenes. Is when he's speaking to Javier Bardem, and he's apologising, he's saying sorry, and he's very like himself, and he has that moment, and he's like, "I'm meant to be pretending to be this guy who just told me to tell my boss to basically."
Well, he told him to fuck off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it was like one of those things where it's like you kind of see it in Jamie Foxx's face, realise, and he's like, actually, if that guy keeps you, he notices the gun thing, and he was like, if that guy keeps pointing my gun at me, and when that happens, you can see Javier Bardem kind of being like, oh, okay, this almost. He does mention at the end, he does say, keep an eye on him and stuff, which obviously seemingly amounts to nothing unless I miss something.
No, they follow them to the club.
That's
how the big shootout happens. Yeah,
right. Of course, yeah, because the three factions almost. Yeah, right. That is correct. Yeah, sorry. But with that moment, it's just like. I really liked that, seeing Jamie Foxx just kind of come out of his show, and that's the moment where he kind of pushes over his own boundaries, and where he starts fighting back both against Vincent, who's kind of turned him into this, and he's taking control of his own life. And I really like that moment of almost his own clarity and his own confidence coming back. Once again, dialogue I think is brilliant in this film, and the characters themselves work really well. It's just little things kind of let it down from it being a top tier.
Well, I mean, Fox was Oscar nominated for this, and I think rightly so. I think Cruise himself, this is one of his best performances, I would say, and he is often somebody who's overlooked because of his star power and his $1 million smile, and I think sometimes people miss what he's doing underneath all of that. I think that is a definite shame. I think he probably could have been Oscar nominated himself for his. I don't really hold much weight in awards anyway, but I think if it's something which gives you some kudos for the job you've done. And this is early on in Fox's career as well. So I think it was a real proving point for him, because he then went on to do obviously bigger, not necessarily better, but bigger and more successful things, getting roles like Ray. I think that's what he won his actual Oscar for, didn't he? Playing Ray Charles.
Oh, I've not seen that movie.
The biopic of that. So this was the point where you could see he was going to go on and be a very successful actor in his own right.
I think my film for Jamie Foxx was Law Abiding Citizen, which is also the film that I started liking Gerard Butler in, but I don't think I've seen many films with him in since.
I've seen that, I think. That's the one where Gerard Butler's in prison, he tries to break out.
Kind of, that's a part of it, but yeah, it's all about him bending the law, and it's one of my favourite films ever, and I always forget about it, of how clever it is. I love a clever movie, so and when I saw Jamie Foxx in that, before I see actors in certain things, I used to have I used to always judge them beforehand. You'd see them be in a couple of big films. I used to do it with Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise and things, and I'd be like, oh, they're just really good looking guys, or they've just been in these films, these kinds of films. And then you watch a film where they really get to shine. And I think for Brad Pitt, for me, was probably Fight Club, I think. But I saw him in a couple of things, and I was like, oh, this guy, and Snatch as well. And I was like, this guy can really act. Yeah, he's stunningly attractive, but he can really act. Whereas Jamie Foxx, he's a very good looking chap, but I think I when I saw him in Law Abiding, I was like, oh, he's really good. I'm really intrigued. And then everything I've seen him in since, has been like that. But yeah, I don't talk about Law Abiding Citizen enough, or ever,
No.
really. So I think it's a banging movie, but not relevant at all. Statham is
Of course it's relevant. It's Jamie Foxx, isn't it? So you mentioned the dialogue, and this definitely has like a philosophical bent, doesn't it, this movie? You get a lot of Cruise talking about I Ching and all these other things that he's clearly absorbed in his time. What did you think of those moments between him and Fox?
Do you want me to go first, mate?
Yeah.
What moments?
It was all right. Yeah, I loved it. I mean, I love any people talking about philosophy or even their own interpretations of certain things. And, you know, one of the things about myself I've self-described is I have an approximate knowledge of most things, which is I'm not really an expert in anything apart from maybe Star Wars. But aside from that, I've just got one of my things that I like to think makes me a fairly strong podcast host is because I know enough about almost anything to be able to have a conversation. And I felt like with Cruise, I kind of got that vibe. I was like, he's someone he's switched on. He's paying attention. He's paying attention to his surroundings. He's not just going off killing people. He wants people to think that about him. He wants people to think he just goes in, kill, done, gone. But he really does absorb a lot of what's going on. And you would kind of have to do that to be such an aware and successful and efficient hitman. So I really liked seeing that element of it. I wouldn't actually mind. I don't know if I'd see it in the cinema or if it would just go on my infinite list and I'd watch it in 20 years. But almost like a spin-off just about Cruise being a hitman. I mean, I imagine Cruise has done 10 other films where he plays a very similar role of a hitman or something similar. But I would actually quite like to see that, him kind of learning and picking up those things.
Becoming Vincent.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Any thoughts, or have I stolen all the ideas?
Thoughts about their conversations or the philosophy? I don't really remember him speaking about his philosophical views.
It's kind of when they're talking about, when they're kind of trying to figure each other out, I think is what the...
He just has a really interesting outlook on life. And I think at times I get a little bit scared about what characters I identify with. Because when he's talking about, it's after the first killing and the guy's dead and Max is like, oh my God, this is awful. And he's like, well, have you heard of Rwanda and all these people that died here? Max is like, of course I've heard of Rwanda. And he's like, well, what did you do to help those people? Oh, nothing. So this one fat guy I've just killed, just because you saw it, suddenly you care. And sometimes people say these things within movies or books and I just think, shit, absolutely, that is totally correct. It's because it's only affecting you in your immediate life that you care about it. He just has this kind of nihilistic, cynical worldview that I think feels pretty accurate to a lot of the world, unfortunately.
It makes me think of Joker in The Dark Knight. One of the reasons obviously that film is very rare to come across someone who doesn't think that film's amazing. And if there is anyone who thinks it's not, well, you're wrong. Because it's one of the greatest films ever made. And I'll die on that hill. But Heath Ledger, obviously, his performance is held in very high regard, as it should be. And there's that moment, which is one of my favourite moments in film history, in any films I've seen, is when he has the two people on the boat. He's got the prisoners and the civilians, the good people in air quotes. And he's like, they're gonna, these people are perceived as good and bad, but they're not. And his whole thinking behind it, I thought, kudos to Chris Nolan and then everyone else involved in the writing of that. It's such a clever idea, and the way the Joker comes about that, and obviously Joker's interpreted in very various different ways across film and comics and stuff, but in that moment, that, as you said, the kind of the nihilistic view on things, where it's just like people don't matter in a way, and you can manipulate them because they think that they're good when they're not, and all these little elements, it links into that, and I think they can be right, and I think that Tom Cruise's point is right, and it's that idea where it's like, how can you think your life means anything if you're one of 8 billion people on a hunk of rock spinning through, God knows how many trillions of galaxies and XYZ, scaling up and things? Do you care about ants dying where you're just an ant, but you zoom out a bit more? I think those things are just, and I agree with a lot of them, but I think that it's quite easy to agree with many philosophical things. I think that's where I come from. What about you with... I know you're not as into nihilism and thinking about...
I think Megan went somewhere else just then.
I did.
She did.
Yeah, I completely forgot about that whole conversation. But I think that's an interesting concept, because it's like the whole philosophy with, if you're on a train track and you're going in one direction and there's like 4 people on the train track, would you change the direction to only kill one person? or would you could just continue on the path that is the path that it's heading towards? Like, why does one life, like, do you know, like that kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, me and the guys I've used to ask, they used to get sick of me asking this on a Friday. It's probably part of the reason I started the podcast, actually, was because people on Friday nights I'd hang out with my mates, we play board games, have a few drinks and stuff, and occasionally myself and my friend Reese, who's, you know, been on the show a few times on the first and 100th episode, we like talking about these conceptual questions of things like you know, would you kill every dog on earth? Would every dog on earth has to die, or all your family and friends die? It's it's one of those weird things, and you can kind of I've not done the podcast because I think some of the questions can be considered insensitive or upsetting or whatever, but you kind of scale it up. It's like, okay, would you kill your partner to save the whole country of Britain, to save everyone in Britain? And people would be like,
the whole country of Britain.
Well, the whole country of Britain, yeah, that's terrible. The whole country of England, everyone in England.
That classic country Britain.
Would you do that? And the answer, you know, people sometimes say, no, I wouldn't save the human race because humans suck. And I go, what if it was puppies? And they go, oh, I'd probably do this. It's like, okay, you have to kill one puppy with your bare hands, or 1,000 puppies die. And it's things like that, which is just like weird philosophical questions. You can go down endless rabbit holes of thinking of that sort of stuff. And I think a lot of it is, to what Tom Cruise, Vincent was saying, is like, it's just kind of in what's your immediate closeness. You know what I mean? You know, I wouldn't want to kill anyone, but if it's between killing Megan or killing 5 strangers, I would kill the strangers, even though in a utilitarian view, that's morally incorrect. So I think it's fair, though, to have a bit of perspective on knowing, you know, people can have these thoughts and you can think about nihilism and all this sort of stuff, but it doesn't necessarily make you a bad person, Megan.
Good to know that he'd go for the 5, though. That's nice to know.
Yeah.
But it's interesting you mentioned the Joker, and we've mentioned Fight Club because obviously Tyler Durden as well fits into this pattern of these kind of characters, I think, who have a worldview which sometimes you can agree with, but not with the means and the ways that they get there sometimes.
Agreed, yeah, completely.
I put those in the line. And actually that scene you were talking about earlier with Max, Jamie Foxx running down the road through the business district, that really reminds me of Ed Norton's narrator when he's running down the streets towards the end of the movie trying to stop the Tyler Durden plan. I got real good big vibes of that. And he does a funny scene, doesn't he, trying to break into the building actually as well. Very similar to Max when he's in the bin. I think he does almost exactly the same thing. Hits with the bin and then shoots it with a gun.
And I will say, Tom Cruise running, I said to Megan, I was like, as soon as he started running,
fast.
He is ridiculous.
He's like, so fast. He's like a bullet train.
He's like, Megan hasn't seen this film because I'm a failure, but Terminator 2, Robert Kirkman, when he's running down
Robert
the street.
Patrick, yeah.
Patrick, sorry, yeah. Robert Kirkman is, I think, the guy who writes Walking Dead.
He is, yeah.
And
I
Marvel
think he runs a lot slower, if I'm honest.
Probably.
Not to be rude, but you know.
Yeah, I went to a convention and he was talking there, and I was like, he doesn't look like he could outrun Tom Cruise, let's be honest. So, or Robert Patrick. But when I saw Tom Cruise running, I was like, that is terrifying. Like him,
so speedy.
Quick. I was watching him and I was like, because
Can you imagine if he was in the Halloween movies? Everyone would be fucked.
It'd be over a lot quicker, wouldn't they?
It would be.
But yeah, I think it's almost in Tom Cruise's contract. He just has to run in a film. But how fast he was running, and I think the kind of shoes he was wearing, I was like, and the floor, because it was is that tile flooring of a subway. I was like, I'm surprised. I would be scared of falling over. I was watching it. I was like, I was almost thinking if I could see it was bloopers. I was like, what if he fell?
I've just remembered the train scene.
Oh, at the end of this film?
Yeah, I just remembered it because you said the subway. I remember that now. I really liked that scene.
Let's talk about it. Go on. Lead us in, Megan.
I liked that. I thought it was interesting because obviously they got onto the train. He managed to figure out exactly what train they were on. And then it was like the whole thing where they were trying to get off. And then it was like them like peering out. They knew that if they went out, he was going to shoot them. Yeah, I thought that was really smart. But how did he know what train they were on? There were two. There were 2 trains, weren't there? Or was
one at the top, one at the bottom, and they were in different directions.
But he just somehow managed to know.
Guessed. I think
that was the train.
Yeah, I think it was a bit of a guess. That's what.
And also the fact that they didn't go to the street because they had 2 options, didn't they? He was like, no. She was like, this one goes to the street. He was like, no, let's go to the subway. And then somehow Vincent knew that he would go to the subway.
Yeah, I imagine, I interpreted that as he obviously the bottom of that building is all glass, and I think he, in theory, because the foyer was quite large, I interpreted that because I thought that a little bit, but I was like, maybe it's just that the door would have probably closed, and he looked and saw none of the doors had moved. He could see because it was all glass, there was no it didn't look like there was anyone. But he did have those 2 moments where it was almost like a coin toss, and he was right both times.
It's difficult with things like that, though, because these are some of the things. It's like when you watch a horror movie and they start running upstairs, and you're like, why are you going upstairs? You've literally just blocked yourself in. Like, that building is huge. Like, they could have just hidden in a random room.
All the lights are off as well.
All of the lights, the power had been turned off. They could have literally just hidden. It would have taken Vincent hours to even try and find them. And it's just, it's little things like this it's just the unrealistic chances of him going to the exact place that they chose to go to on the exact train that they went on, when there are probably hundreds of rooms within this building.
I think Megan is on everyone's zombie survival team, by the way, with the things that come out tonight. I think everyone needs to snap you up. Everyone's getting quick if you want her on your team. Because I think you clearly have a very, your processing of what you've been doing in these moments is very clear. I think for them, they're panicking, right? And I think Vincent is dealing with people that are panicking. So I think that excuses the first one, like the fact they're leaving the building and he knows they'd leave the building. And I think almost like an excuse the doors, because it's the only place he visits earlier in the movie, but before the killing, isn't it? Because he gets the key card, so he can then come in and out of the building at that point, at any point in the day, at the night when he wants to. So I guess he would have known they would have had to smash their way out. Or the train, though, that is the harder one to buy. That how did he know? I guess we can read into it that he's so in sync with Max now, or he's so good at his job, or it almost like we need to talk about the coyote at some point. Like he's almost like the coyote that we see crossing the road earlier in the movie. He's almost following the scent. But I agree that one's a little bit tough to stomach, that he just happened to get on the right train.
It seems odd that they had the moment where he was choosing to, and I thought the film was almost going to end because
he didn't even get on the train, did he? He climbed onto the back of it and climbed through the exit. Because
he stood there looking for ages, and I thought, oh, what's going to happen? The way this film is going to end, because I try not to look at film. I look at the runtime before watching it, but then when we start the film, I try my very best to not stop it and see how far we're through, because obviously if you're halfway through the film and the protagonist is in a really dire situation, unless a film takes a huge left turn, which is quite rare, they're going to get out of it. And for me personally, that somewhat spoils pacing and etc. But with this film, with the puppet and things like that, we watched it in 2 parts. So when we started at a halfway point, sort of, I think I was in the Javier Bardem, Jamie Foxx.
Yeah, it was when he was about to go and speak to him in that club.
Yeah, so which was quite a nice place to stop, actually. So it worked quite well. But I remember when it got to that point, I was like, I feel like we're quite near the end of the film. So I was like, oh, maybe this is going to be his one error, kind of the one big error. He has 2 choices, 50-50. He makes the wrong one, and then maybe the 2 trains go in opposite directions, and he just at the corner sees, Max and Annie
nice
going
imagery.
off. And and then it would have been maybe, then I'd have, if I was making this film, fade out, and then fade back in, and then it's like a courtroom, and it's Max, Annie, and Tom Cruise's character, Vincent, in a courtroom, or coming out of a court, or something along the lines of basically being like, she's the one who put him away at the end, and his own doing this job is the thing that actually got him in the end, which I know is technically what happened, but it was the shooting bit, I think, is what kind of the ending where they both shoot each other. When I saw that, I think we both had the same kind of thought, because we could both kind of went, what just happened? Because you had each person shooting at each other.
I think I asked you.
Yeah,
I think
did.
I said, what just happened? And Mike was like, well, they just shot at each other. Max is fine, but Vincent's been shot. And I was like, oh, all right then.
Vincent's being shown as being such a, the way they kind of located him being a hitman and a professional is because it's 2 in the chest, 1 in the head, which is also the John Wick special. Obviously, John Wick came out of this, but the chest head. It's like, that's so, it's just a bit odd. And I wonder if one of the interpretations, I'm sure you'll take us through it, Jack, is going to be, is it divine intervention? Is it one of those things?
Well, I said right this up. This is the bit that always used to bother me about the film. I used to really love it from the first time I saw it, except for I used to think it's such a cop-out ending. Like, of course, the good guy has to get the bad guy, and I never liked it. And I think now I know why it happens. It makes total sense, and it has totally changed my understanding of the ending. And you just said it yourself, Mike. He is clinical. He is professional. He is always 2 in the chest and 1 in the head, right? So there's 2 things that happen in this movie. We get told that very, very deliberately, almost like Chekhov's shooting pattern. And if you know the Chekhov's gun joke,
The idea of whenever you see something that's out of place in a film that is specific, normally at the start, it always comes back to something. It's like...
Oh, well, yeah, because it was mentioned in the when they were looking at the dead bodies, wasn't it?
Yeah, but the film term is Chekhov's razor. It's basically, if something shows up in a film, it's probably significant. It's that idea of whenever there's a big plot twist or anything like that.
Oh, yeah, well, it's like right at the beginning when he gives the postcard to...
Okay, yeah, that's another, like Chekhov's postcard, absolutely, yeah. So, yeah, Chekhov's gun is where it started because there was like a gun that was shown in close-up, and then that gun was used for the murder later on. But it's become that term where, like when you're Fridging a Woman came from the comic books. And so we get the Chekhov's gunshot, right? So we get told very specifically that he does this pattern every time. He kills everybody every time. We also get throughout the film this mention of Jamie Foxx's character, Max, getting lucky with the lights. I don't know if you notice that whenever he drives somewhere, it's with Annie and it's with Vincent the first time he drives. He says, I can get you there in this amount of time. And both times he gets there, he says, I got lucky with the lights. Right? So what happens at the end of the movie in the train? The lights will go out and they have the shooting between each other. And as I said, it always pissed me off. I never got it until I read about it this time. And the reason Vincent misses Max and Max hits Vincent is because the lights are out. So it's chance now anyway, because Max gets lucky with the lights. But also Max shoots randomly. So again, people can't see what I'm doing, but pew, 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 pew. I'm shooting randomly across my screen. Whereas Vincent shoots 2 in the chest, 1 in the head, which all hit the middle bit of the door, the metal frame of the door. Whereas Max's go through the window.
Oh, right. So when the subway door is closed, you've got the metal and there's the 2 view hole parts.
Yeah. So because Vincent follows his professional, he hits the door part, the metal part, whereas Max hits through the windows and shatters them and hits Vincent.
That
That's
makes
interesting.
sense. But I feel like what they should have made a bit more of an obvious thing of that.
I just feel like sometimes, like, that's smart, but sometimes I feel like people make it too smart.
Yeah.
And
agreed.
that's where it
I hadn't got it. You guys hadn't got it.
Time.
So how many other people that are watching this movie just never got that? And I've only got it from reading about it afterwards. Exactly. So yeah.
And you've said you've rewatched this film as well, which obviously I assume at least twice because of doing it now and you'd seen it prior.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty good film, so I could see rewatching it being enjoyable. But yeah, that was a bit off. But that makes actually a lot of sense. I kind of wish they'd have made a bit more of a thing of that because I think my coming out of the movie would have been something better.
Yeah, but then at the same time, people would then complain that they've made it too explicit.
I remember it just being a flashy mess, and then Jamie Foxx being fine. I don't even remember seeing bullet holes on the door. I feel like
they are there if you go back and look closely. They are definitely there.
I feel like if you had a second or two of just they're both standing there and the windows are smashed and you see like the 2 and the 1 like fully in there. And you see that just on screen just for a second, and then the doors maybe open, and then you see, Tom Cruise collapse or stumble, whatever, maybe. But it's very easy in hindsight. Me being someone who's never made a feature film in my life, going, you know what, Michael Mann, you should do this, prolific heat director. You should do this one small thing, and I know what I'm talking about.
It's also important for the symmetry of the movie, isn't it? It's gone full cycle. Because at the start, Cruise talks about there's a famous story about the guy that died on a subway in LA, and he travelled around for 6 hours and nobody noticed, and now he is that guy at the end of the movie. So I know what you said, Mike, about why didn't they drag the body off? Well, for the story reasons, they can't, because we need him to fulfil the role that he had explained was going to happen at the start of the movie.
Yeah, fair play.
All right. Before we get towards the end, because I feel we're getting there. We've hit the end of the movie anyway. There's the coyote earlier on in the movie, and we get that beautiful Audio Slave needle drop where Chris Cornell comes in and starts singing. What do you think of that moment? Because that's a bit that was always jotted me out. And again, I had to read about it, so maybe you shouldn't have to read about it. But it's really fascinating when you look into the symbolism of why they put that bit in the movie.
I was actually thinking that was arguably my least favourite.
I did find
scene.
it confusing.
I understood it to a degree. I think I did. I viewed it, obviously he's a coyote, but I kind of viewed it as him being a lone wolf. I was like, he's wearing grey, he kills, all that sort of stuff. I know that obviously wolves in packs and stuff, but I've kind of viewed it as he's a lone wolf. And if you are a lone wolf, you're not very effective at hunting, actually, at the end of the day. So it would lead to your downfall. And as much as I enjoy Chris Cornell and Audio Slave and Soundgarden, was his other band, yeah. As much as I enjoy his music and things, and I mean, Coach Ice, brilliant song, Gasoline as well. I'm just going to list off loads of Chris Cornell songs. Why not? Just to prove I know what I'm talking about. I like that, but I find it sometimes movies do this where I love a good soundtrack, and I think this film I even wrote has a really good soundtrack. The classical music use in this is really good. I think
jazz and
I think the music in the shootout was a bit weak. That kind of didn't feel like it fitted.
It's really that's in Jason in the Bourne movies, isn't it, as well? That Ready Steady Go, really upbeat, like
yeah, but and it's kind of like it's kind of quiet, but it's not so quiet it's background noise, and it's not loud enough like it's something in the start of Blade or in like John Wick. It's this weird middle volume, and it's not a very interesting track. It just kind of sounds like a generic upbeat track. So apart from that bit, I loved for the first hour of the film the classical music and all that stuff. But I found that sometimes I get films where a director seems to really love a song and they just want any excuse to put it in the film. And sometimes it works. 30 seconds of a song rarely hurts anyone and can really add to certain movies. But it felt like, I don't think they played the whole song, but it felt like they played for quite a while. It was like 2 to 3 minutes almost of just song and shots. And I was like, I don't really like it personally when films do that, where I know art housey films do it quite a lot as well, but for those genres it seems to work a bit. Or when you're watching someone just make a sandwich and you're just watching them do it in real time for ages, I just felt in this film it kind of messed with the pacing a bit. It felt like things were starting to go, and they was like, okay, here's an interlude for an Audio Slave song and just a few shots, and I was like, is something meant to be happening? And I felt like they were trying to be like, this is a reflection on Vincent, but for me I was like, this is just not really doing anything for me. I don't know if you felt the same, Megan.
I just found it confusing. Like the likelihood of a coyote walking around at that time. Like, I know that it's empty, but LA is pretty busy.
They do have a coyote problem, actually.
I didn't say that they didn't.
Oh, sorry. I thought that's what you were making the point. Apologies.
It just took me out of it a little bit because it was just so, like, it felt random.
And I think it is. I think it's a problem. I always saw it as a lone wolf thing. I agree. That's how I read it. And as much as I like the song as well, and I like Cornell's voice, I think is amazing. It does feel like a moment that Mann's forced in, and I think it is musically and symbolically. Because then when you read about it, and it's like harkening back, I'm just looking at my notes as I'm saying it. It's like a Native American Navajo omen, which is if a coyote crosses your path, it's going to lead to bad fortune. You're going to have an accident or get killed, or like how many people watching this movie know that is the question. And I think the thing we spoke about before, that with the shooting, you can kind of excuse, and it's you've been smart enough to follow this, or unfortunately in our case, 3 people have not been smart enough to follow it. This one does feel like it's a moment that takes you out of the movie, doesn't it?
But it would make sense if people in this film weren't Native American. But
sure.
No one is, so it kind of just feels out of place
to
have that kind of symbolism without any other reference to that culture and that, like,
or even if a coyote was mentioned prior, if maybe Tom Cruise, Vincent said something like,
if he was the coyote, or
maybe if he said, I'm a lone wolf, and maybe Jamie Foxx said, I think you're more of a coyote.
Yeah, but then I feel like that's too on the nose.
But that would have made sense, though. It just felt like it was like, here's a coyote, and there's an omen from Native Americans, and you're like, in what part of a Hitman Taxi LA movie has got anything to do with Native Americans? No part. There wasn't even, to my knowledge, there wasn't at least a front and center even Native American actor or character.
No.
So what if he was a Native American actor? And then obviously in turn making the ethnicity of the character that, I'd go, yeah.
Or if they'd, like, obviously when they were talking about the different philosophies and he was talking about like Rwanda and what happened there, if they had linked it to Native American culture at that point, then there would have been a connection. But it just felt really random.
Out of left field.
Oh, there's a script doctoring. So now Megan is not only your zombie survival team, she's your script doctor, because that is where it would have worked. You take out Rwanda and you put in the Native American genocide. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. The thing is that if I were in a zombie apocalypse, I'd probably be the first to die.
You have a dodgy angle.
I would sacrifice myself for everybody else. I would give everyone my plan, and then I'd
more reason to have you,
myself.
if let's be honest.
We also got a pickaxe in our shed because we recently redid our gardens. We've got a pickaxe, we've got weights, including like a barbell that you can take the weights off. I've often thought if a zombie apocalypse ever happened, and I'd be screwed, but I'd be like, I think I could use this as a weapon. I think that'd be quite cool. I mean, I have no chance. We'd just get absolutely decimated. Megan's got the dodgiest ankle in the world. So it's just like, she fractured it like 3 times. And it seems like you get, whenever you're fine, you'll get a month period where you're fine.
And then I'll injure it in a really stupid way.
Like in Malta, you stepped off a normal size
That was my other ankle. That wasn't the bad one.
So it's the non-bad ankle that has then gone bad for a while. So Megan would not, she'd be the plan. You'd have to be the brain.
I'd be the brains.
You know, someone in a locked room where
you're the oracle.
Walls are really thick. Yeah, exactly.
And I'd basically be like, you see what they do in horror films? Do the exact opposite.
Yeah, don't have sex in the woods. Maybe even ever in nighttime. That happens a lot in the Scream, not the Scream movies, but things like, I'm thinking of Evil Dead. But there's like a cabin in the woods. Like the film itself is brilliant. But I mean, like the trope of being teenagers having sex in horror movies, that happens all the time, and that's normally when one of them gets killed.
Everybody, you need to stay celibate. Everyone,
on Halloween,
need to wear
no sex.
What's the little chastity belt?
Chastity belts. Oof. Yeah, I'm not an advocate for those. I mean, to be fair, Cabin in the Woods is like meta beyond belief, and that I think is one of the best horror films ever. And Megan can't stand it because it gets too weird.
I don't like it. It goes too weird.
Yeah, I just think, and this is me being kind of a dick, and I accept that. I just think anyone who doesn't like Cabin in the Woods, in my opinion, just doesn't watch enough horror films, because I think it's so clever and so genius. It's like Evil Dead 2 elevated. You know, it's everything kind of Sam Raimi's kind of style and humour elevated. So for me, Cabin in the Woods, when I hear, I don't like Cabin in the Woods, I'm like, you just don't get it. Which is a really dicky thing to think, and even dickier to say on a podcast about my girlfriend.
It's very, very patronising, isn't it?
It is, and so I apologise. I completely take it.
You don't apologise. Don't even pretend.
I apologise for me thinking that. I don't apologise for being honest and saying it, but I do apologise that that's unfortunately how I am.
Anyway, we've gone off on a tangent.
Sorry, guys.
The tone does not tell anyone listening what the face is like on Megan right now after that comment from Mike.
If people listen to some podcasts with us, some of them may think that we don't like each other, because certain podcasts we just rip on each other constantly. But if you listen to enough of us,
yeah, I mean, if you were to see my face, it would tell you everything that I'm thinking, because I am very much one of those people that I have to check my face a lot of the time because all of my emotions come out of my face.
Terrible poker.
If there are people saying something that I don't necessarily agree with, I really have to watch what my face is doing.
Certain family gatherings, Megan has to be very careful when there's a certain family member who starts spouting off a bit of nonsense. Megan has to kind of look away.
Yes, it's true.
Well, it is the joy of your Patreon. You know, let's get that little plug in there now. You know, you get all of this, you get all of that joy. You get the bickering, you get the fun.
You do. You get to hear a lot of the laughter on Patreon.
You
get a lot of me saying stupid things and Megan pulling me up on it. And me openly accepting it, and
a lot of me yawning and singing.
You have been singing a lot recently.
I do sing a lot on the Patreon. We're not even at the end.
We've still got Stath to talk about. We can plug our Patreon then. Megan, you're singing when we watch Jersey Boys.
oh yeah, the Jersey Boys.
Les Miserables. Whenever we watch musicals, Megan's like, it's a musical episode of Patreon, so it's an excuse for me to sing.
It.
The Jersey Boys one in particular, I do go very, very high pitched.
She tries to do Frankie Valli. I try to do it a little bit, and Megan's a pretty good singer. I am not, so you get to hear my terrible singing.
But the exciting thing about that, and this is a complete tangent, and I do apologise, everyone. But the great thing about that one is that I sang. What was the song called? Big Girls Don't. Is it Big Girls Don't Cry? Is that what the song's called? But it's that song, and then afterwards, I was like, I'm pretty sure I got that in the right key. I was like, Mike, you have to get it up on Spotify. And then he got it up on Spotify and I was like, I got it in the right fucking key. I was like, yes. I was like, that's so good.
Yeah, it wasn't quite Spotify because you can't listen to Patreon stuff on Spotify. But yes, it was...
No, we listened to the Frankie Valli song on Spotify.
I see. So I remember...
So that I could hear whether it was in the right key.
That's right, because we listened... Because you got me to get the recording we'd just done on my phone and play the Frankie Valli
at the same time.
And then hers, just to compare to be sure. Yes, I did get that note. Whereas me, I can't... I'm not a good singer. For me, I'm like, yeah, I did not nail that at all.
Anyway, apologies, everyone.
Never apologise for being you, Megan.
Everyone is now rushing off to sign up to Patreon and sync up Frankie Valli.
Exactly. It's only £1 a month, friends, and there's over 100 episodes of Afterthoughts on there. The vast majority have Megan in. So, recommend it, guys.
So, Jason Statham, you said it. Let's get back on track.
Let's do it.
The Transporter, Megan, you've seen it?
Yes.
You remember that
I
he has
have.
many license plates?
Mm-hmm. I remember enjoying the film,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't really remember anything about it.
You remember that he's bald?
I do remember that he's bald
And that
he's stocky.
stocky and
Yeah.
ripped, and that he transports things?
Yeah.
Much like he does at the start of this movie, right? He transports a suitcase to Tom Cruise's Vincent. So that is the fan theory, that he is playing Frank Martin, the transporter, at the
That's
start
interesting.
of this movie.
And Transporter came out only within a year or so of this, didn't it?
Yeah. So I think Transporter is maybe 2002 and this is 2004.
Yeah. So recording wise, it would have been similar. Maybe he was where it was like he was doing filming for Transporter, and they're like, "Hey, got a little."
Can you just do a little thing?
Yeah.
I
love
some Statham.
I like those theories. I really like having when you've got films that aren't. I like it when directors do it a lot. I know Tarantino and obviously Kevin Smith does it intentionally, but I like Tarantino's kind of idea that in all his films are either in the same universe as each other or they reference things. Or I love it in, because we keep talking about Halloween, I love it in Halloween when you watch, I think it's Halloween 3, which is a very odd movie. I did enjoy it, but when they're watching Halloween 1 on the TV, that sort of stuff, it's so silly, but I love it. So that theory of Statham being another character
Like a
in the
little
film.
Easter egg in it.
Yeah.
Nobody's
Yeah,
ever confirmed or denied, so people can choose to believe what they wish.
That's interesting.
Transporter 1.5.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, you know, in Transporter, he's in Nice, I think, and then in Transporter 2, he has moved to America, so who knows?
And he's in an airport, is he? No, where does he do it? He is an airport, isn't he? He's called Airport Guy. So maybe that's literally him. That is him landing in America before the start. Instead of a post-credit scene, this is a pre-credit scene.
Nice.
A pre-title screen. There you go. That's what this is. I can never unsee that now. Now we're going to have to watch all 3 Transporter movies. Well, I say all 3. I think there's more, but the Statham ones.
That is correct. Especially number 2, which is glorious and is coming out very soon.
Yeah, well, you talking about it has made me want to watch it.
Oh, good.
If we had infinite time, basically people support me on Patreon, and then I get enough time to be able to just watch every film on Back to the Filmography.
If everyone could support Mike enough on Patreon that neither of us have to work, then we can watch all of these films.
Yeah, we'll need. If everyone gives £1 a month, we need quite a few thousand, but we can do it, guys.
Yeah.
Every single listener give us some money, and then we don't have to work, and then we'll release more podcasts.
Everyone wins.
Indeed. Is that the main theory with Statham? Because when you first said at the start about it, I was thinking, is the theory like he's actually a boss even above Javier Bardem's character? Maybe he's actually somehow even above, or maybe he trained Tom Cruise. Maybe he's like so beyond him, because didn't the bag have all the supplies that Tom Cruise needed? Because obviously Jamie Foxx threw it out. And
that's why he had to go and get the backup files.
Yeah, so maybe it's like he's actually he's above Vincent. He's actually beyond that. He's the hitman who trained Vincent. Maybe that's what I was kind of thinking you were alluding to with the fan theories.
I think you can write your own.
Oh, I will. I'll write my own screenplay. Blackjack and hookers. That's a Futurama reference that you don't know about, Megan.
Cool.
Outrageous.
And then the other thing with the Statham is that I can't find any evidence of this anymore, but I swear that I saw that he was up for the role of Vincent. Like Michael Mann was interested in him until, of course, a little man known as Tom Cruise. I didn't mean that as a slight on his height, but it came out that way. Became interested himself in the role, and that's why Statham has this weird little small role in it. And I can't seem to track down any like evidential truth of this anymore, but I've held on to that nugget of information for a long time, so I must have read it somewhere at some point. So what do you think the movie would have been like should Jason Statham, the Stath, have been Vincent?
I think he's too like rough and ready. I think the fact that Tom Cruise's portrayal of it, he's very, just as you say, clinical. I wouldn't use that word to describe Jason Statham. Like he's like a lad, isn't he? Like,
all right, Megan, yeah, all right.
Yeah, exactly.
I get your point.
Exactly. Whereas Tom Cruise isn't like that.
He's smooth, isn't he?
He's smooth.
He's like, it's almost like Tom Cruise is like marble, like very finely carved.
Yeah,
marble,
it's like if you go to a beach and find like just a random rock, that's Jason Statham. If you then take that rock home and put it in one of those like polishing machines, that's Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
We can't say anything better than that, can we?
No, I mean, I would have loved. I mean, I'd love. You guys have not even mentioned this. I don't know why it came up in my brain, but having like almost like a crystal ball, being able to see alternate universes. I'd love to just have one where I could watch any film where Jason Statham could be the lead.
Oh,
just
nice.
Like
yeah.
an infinite multiverse where Jason Statham has basically been the main character in basically every movie. Could you imagine watching like Captain America and him being Captain America, or him being Iron Man? Like, I would love to see Statham, not with any of his dodgy accents, but him just being him or in any of these films. I think I would just like to see that for fun. But
yeah, absolutely. Pride and Prejudice, that'd be a good one. Oh, Mr. Darcy.
I think we'd see him in a Wes Anderson movie, because obviously that's very specific and very, and I think I'd love to see that. But
I don't think this film would have worked as well. It would have just become another gangster movie. It would have just been another run-of-the-mill gangster film. It wouldn't have been different.
I think that the thing is with it as well is that in Megan saying that, I don't disagree, but I also think because the perception would have done that, that would have inherently changed how people perceive the film as well.
100%.
Like so it's one of those almost self-fulfilling prophecies. It's like if you put Statham in a film like this, the film then becomes more like Statham's other movies. Whereas with Tom Cruise, although he's a big action Hollywood star, at least at this point in his career, he was still doing a varied roles. He wasn't just the Mission Impossible guy. He was the running guy. He still did a lot of things. Tom Cruise, I think that's one of the things about Hollywood actors when they're really top, like absolute top, like Brad Pitt or Tom Cruise, is that them being in a film does not define its genre. Whereas I think when you have people like Keanu Reeves or Jason Statham or The Rock in a film, it somewhat defines its genre by them being one of the main characters in it, in itself defines the film. So I think it's very insightful, Megan.
Yeah, it would have changed it. I mean, could you have even had Jamie Foxx? The foil wouldn't have worked, would it? You'd had to have changed that, I think.
Yeah, I don't think his character development would have worked as well.
No, not at all.
Against Statham. No,
because also he's like, he was a lawyer, wasn't he? Because he does all of the thing to do with like, when he's talking, Vincent, was he some sort of lawyer? He has some sort of knowledge.
We don't know what his background was. Yeah, you're right. I mean, it could be, didn't it? I always assumed it was something military, and then he'd gone into.
Because he talks to the boss, and he's like, well, you can't go for that because it's XYZ, because it's like accidental damage. You can't.
For someone who doesn't remember certain things about films, that is very specific knowledge that I'd forgotten for that moment. Megan says she doesn't remember anything about this film.
I just don't think
that out.
I don't think bits like that would have worked with Jason Statham being like, oh yeah, you can't do that, mate, because I'm butchering this.
That was a pretty bad accent, I'm not going to lie. And also, I think it's rude to assume that anyone who speaks like Jason Statham can't be a lawyer.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Here first, Megan says, if you're Cockney, you can't be a lawyer or educated. And Jason Statham, who's neither of those things, clearly.
I just imagine Jason Statham just I know that, again, people can't see me, but he just, like, walks around like this everywhere.
Well, his shoulders first.
Yeah, like, oh, yeah, I'm a lad, kind of thing. I can't picture it.
Oh, I hope this podcast, like both Jack's podcast and Genuine Chit Chat, gets so big and famous that we can have Jason Statham. I wish that imagine if Genuine Chit Chat got big enough that I could have Jason Statham on the show. And I could have you.
Well, this is about Jack.
No,
Jack's doing a whole thing about Jason Statham.
I literally just said, and I could have Jack on the show to meet
yeah, but
Jason
surely
Statham.
it would be Jack would have Jason Statham on his show, and you might get invited.
Yeah, but that's not about me, though, is it? Oh, my show.
This podcast isn't about you, is it?
Well, Jack said at the start it actually was about us. So sorry.
Yeah. I'm here to facilitate the guests, not the other way around. Absolutely. So you can't imagine the Statham role, and I think they're all fair arguments. I mean, obviously, I love the guy, and I think he brings a certain Stathamness to all his roles. But I don't think it wouldn't have worked it wouldn't have worked as the film we've got. It would have fundamentally changed the film, and for better or worse, we'll never know. And I too, Mike, would love to see that version of the film, to see who would be bouncing off and see how Mann would have directed him. And maybe, much like Cruise, if we don't get the Cruise tics, we don't get the Cruise persona, perhaps we wouldn't have got the Stath tics and persona. We might have got something really interesting from him, and he would have gone on to have been not just the Stath guy, who I'm thankful we've got, but maybe would have gone on to be something completely different. It's really interesting to think about it.
That's an interesting theory that maybe you could, if you do like a wrap up of the filmography, the final, like after you've done the last Jason Statham film of that point, and you move on to another person, like what beats in his career have been the most important, because where he started with Guy Ritchie, and where obviously him in Lock, Stock and then Snatch, and the role in Snatch being was it written for him? Is that what you said?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Because he started with Guy Ritchie, I feel like he's always tethered to that.
But yeah, it's set him up for that kind of role, hasn't it?
Yeah, and I wonder if there's ever a point where you could get out of that, because there's certain actors, like when you say, what was Tom Cruise's first film? Most people don't immediately know it. Or you think of DiCaprio, I think is probably the best actor in the entire world. He's not necessarily my favourite, but I think he's probably the best. And I think What's Eating Gilbert Grapes, I think was either his first or one of his earliest ones.
I think it's film number 3. He's somebody I'm doing a filmography watch for funsies.
Is it Critters 3 or something? That's his first film?
For funsies.
I mean, he is in. I think he probably is one of the most consistent filmographies out there.
Yeah,
I think his worst film.
I love
pretty
him.
special.
I think his worst film is The Revenant, and I think, and that's quite a controversial opinion, but I think Tom Hardy is probably the only
Isn't
film.
that the one that he won an Oscar for?
Yeah, but that was just because the internet went mental about it. He should have won it for Wolf of Wall Street. It's criminal he didn't win it for that. But putting that aside, I think with the point I was vaguely making was with DiCaprio, there's not a point in his career that defines who he is. It's every single film he's ever been in adds to showing how much of a phenomenal actor he's in. Same as Tom Cruise in some ways, and same as Brad Pitt. Whereas the Stath is kind of, you see him in Lock, Stock, and almost he goes off that path for a while, and he comes back to it and realizes him almost his Guy Ritchie, him with Guy Ritchie is what started his career, but I feel like it's also some of his best work is when he works with Guy Ritchie later on.
I think it also just depends as what he wants. Like obviously, like Jack's already said that he's happy doing this kind of content, whereas then you get people like Matthew McConaughey that started being in like rom-coms and he wanted to get out of that realm. He didn't want to do that anymore. He didn't want to be just a rom-com artist. And then you've got people like Hugh Grant, which to me, I think, Bridget Jones's Diary, Notting Hill, but then we watched that film, which is Guy Ritchie movie,
Gentleman,
and he's completely different.
That changed my perception of Hugh Grant permanently.
But it depends on what they want, and then you think of also like Robert Pattinson or like Zac Efron, for example, that are in Twilight and High School Musical, and then they've gone off to have their own respective great things because they deliberately wanted to get out of that realm.
And Daniel Radcliffe, him and Elijah Wood.
Daniel Radcliffe.
Both Elijah Wood, who plays Frodo in...
I know who Elijah Wood is, Mike.
All right. So sometimes I say an actor without elaborating, and Megan goes, who on earth are you talking about? And then anytime I do say who they are, they go, of course I know who that is. It's like, you just said you don't know actors very well. I'm sorry. Listeners out there, anyone who doesn't know who Elijah Wood is, he's Frodo in Lord of the Rings. But obviously...
They all know who he is, Mike.
I know. I was only doing that as a joke. But because of both of them being so, they didn't want to be typecast. It was like, I don't want to be Harry Potter and I don't want to be Frodo. So let's do about 20 completely bananas
let's
off
do
the
a play
wall.
in London where I have to get completely naked on stage.
Or like, he did The Woman in Black, and then he did Guns Akimbo and things like that.
I mean, Elijah Wood was in a French anthropology movie that I had to study this at university called Paris Je t'aime, and each like episode is one of the like areas of Paris, and he's in one of those segments, and it's really fucking weird. But that's
he's got a production company that makes horror movies, like really independent, offbeat, weird horror movies. That's like his main thing now. Elijah Wood.
That would make sense because his segment's about vampires as well. So
well, it's
I think I've seen that. Yeah.
It's weird you say that because today, shout out to Spider Dan, I was listening to Spider Dan's and the Secret Wars, one of his recent episodes. I think was it
yet to be released if it's the vampire one.
Exactly, yeah. And in that
time of recording, of course.
And then when in that there's a mention of an Elijah Wood produced vampire film that's quite an art housey film, and I was like, Elijah Wood. And I only today, like hours ago, during my lunch break, if anyone from work is listening, it was definitely during my lunch break. I was listening to that and I was like, Elijah Wood. So it's very bizarre that talking about Statham and Collateral, we've managed to somehow go on a tangent about something that I only found out about today myself. Bizarre.
Meant to be.
Yeah.
The beauty of the Stath, he brings everything together.
He does. All right, so we're going to wrap up, but I think this is interesting. We can't imagine the Stath in the role. But some of the other names that were down for it are really interesting as well. So for Vincent, we could have had Russell Crowe.
I don't think I want Russell
I
Crowe in
don't see
anything.
that.
Fair. Let's whiz through these.
Russell Crowe's the one that I don't like in Les Mis, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I've not seen the Les Mis
Yeah.
movie, but I know that no one likes him in Les
Yeah,
Mis.
I can't see him.
The only thing
as
I think
that.
of with Russell Crowe...
Was he in Gladiator?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
He was also in a recent film we saw, but I won't say what, because I don't think... It was a
Yeah,
recent film we
sure.
saw at the cinema, and he's
Sure.
in that as a very big role.
And is
remember.
not good in it.
Not overly, is he? It's a bit weak. But we've only seen 3 films in the cinema recently, my love. But I don't want to say it regardless. I'll tell you afterwards.
What a lovely thunderous laugh you have, Megan.
But still's not getting it.
No.
But with Crowe, whenever I think of him, I always just think of the South Park thing,
Sure.
which is when he had that controversy of like punching people quite a lot, and I was like, "Oh, you're a massive dick." And then South Park does the little show, which is Russell Crowe fighting around the world, and it's just Russell Crowe going around punching people. That's all I think of when I think of Russell Crowe now. I think,
Oh, I know I know what
yeah.
film you're talking about. Okay.
whenever I think of him, I always think of punching people, being a massive dick, and apparently being terrible in Les Mis, which I've seen the stage performance of on Patreon, but not download now. But anyway,
I can't imagine Russell Crowe playing that.
I don't
part.
think I've ever seen Russell Crowe in a movie, and I've been like, he's a great actor. I know he is because I think is it Rain Man he's meant to be amazing in, and there's a few other films.
Rain Man.
There's a
Tom
Beautiful
Cruise. Yeah, Beautiful
Oh,
Mind.
It's
he's
Tom
in.
Cruise and
I've
is
not-
it Dustin Hoffman?
Mm.
I've not seen Rain Man or Beautiful Mind. They're
Rain
both-
Man is a fantastic movie.
I've heard it's good, but aren't they both vaguely similar about someone who's not, what's the term? It is when, if someone is, for example, autistic, they're not deemed as, it's not, the word isn't normal. It's
someone with special,
no,
it's
it's neurotypical. That's the word.
someone who's
Oh.
not neurotypical.
Neurotypical. Both Rain Man and Beautiful Mind is about someone who's not neurotypical, who's maybe socially awkward in some ways, but very smart. Am I right?
Mhm.
Is that both? Because I've not seen either, so I always get those two confused.
I've only seen Rain Man.
You've seen them both. You're a media teacher, Jack. Go on.
Yes.
They are similar, vaguely.
They are similar, vaguely. All right, so no Russell Crowe either. John Travolta?
Ooh.
I the only reason I'd say yes is because of the character Vincent Vega,
Sure.
which
Yeah.
obviously,
So I
What's
guess that's
that?
probably what was his
Pulp
thought
Fiction.
process.
Oh yeah.
but
Okay.
obviously it wouldn't work because of what happens to him in Pulp Fiction,
Mm.
which no, it can't be a spoiler for Pulp Fiction, can it?
Not at this point, you think.
It's released the year we were born, so if you've not seen it by this point, get
Oh
on
man, that's scary.
John Travolta's a weird one because like when I think of John Travolta, I either think of Grease or I think of Hairspray.
Sure. Okay.
it.
I mean, that would have been a hell of a movie if he'd been playing the character from Hairspray as Vincent.
That would have probably-
Tracy Turnblad's mum.
Yeah.
If that was directed by if that was directed by someone who, maybe Edgar Wright, if Edgar Wright directed this movie
Sure.
with John Travolta playing Tracy Turnbull,
Tracy Turnblad's mum.
Tracy Turnblad's
Edna
mum,
Turnblad.
because I've seen Hairspray, that would
Mhm.
actually that would be a very fun, different movie. When I think of Travolta, I think of Pulp Fiction and Face Off.
I've
Mm.
not seen Face Off.
Well, we will watch it because I think it's on the list up there, and also it's absolutely phenomenal. It's some
It is.
top tier Cage in that film as well.
Absolutely.
Nicolas Cage.
All right, 3 more.
Yeah,
I'll save one to the end. Colin Farrell?
I think he can. Colin Farrell.
Is that the guy from In Bruges?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
He could have been good, I think.
Yeah.
I think
yeah.
he can do almost anything. I think he's a very underrated actor
And
as well.
he's in
The Gentleman and
Mm.
Fantastic
and
Beasts.
Fantastic Beasts. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. I know who you're talking
I
about.
think Colin Farrell is a phenomenal actor. I think he's one of the other ones I saw him in early in his
Yeah.
career, and I was like, he's
Mm.
all right. And then as he goes on, I'm like, he can really act. That guy.
Yeah,
Well-
I can see him playing that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would work.
No. So, yeah, and the Stath we've done. And the last one that was mooted was DiCaprio. He could have been Vincent. I think too young at that point, but
I think he's too pretty in some ways. If it was now, if it was DiCaprio from sort of Django Unchained,
Mhm.
that era of him, I think that would work really well. Obviously, they'd probably grey up his hair and make him look older somewhat. I think if he played because he does losing his mind quite well. He becoming unhinged. He does that very well. He does it in loads of movies. And I think him, with what he does in Django and in Wolf of Wall Street, I think if you had more of that, if he leaned into the unhinged part, all DiCaprio would need is about 5 seconds of a certain facial expression or him doing something crazy, like breaking the glass or things like that. And I think the unhinged part would have come off really well.
How old would DiCaprio have been during, like, what films would have DiCaprio have done at this point?
It's only a few years after Titanic.
It's only a few years
after
5
Titanic.
years
after Titanic.
So this is
production-wise.
Yeah, so he probably The Beach is probably about the right sort of era.
So still quite young. Yeah, I agree. You like for someone to be that established of a hitman, they have to have some sort of background and like experience within it. I think yeah, I
agree. And I'm just desperately trying to get him up on IMDb. I think also something like Catch Me If You Can, which he is phenomenal in, playing all the different roles that he does.
Have you seen Catch Me If You Can?
I think I have, maybe.
But he plays like somebody who's like sick. I think the film is a long time span. I won't spoil it, Mike. But he plays somebody who's like 16 through to, the early mid-20s. Okay. If he's playing that role in that movie at the same time, I think is a bit beyond him at this point.
Yeah, I think DiCaprio is one of those guys who he can do anything if he put his mind to it. But he has to work in the film. For example, this sounds a bit weird, but like he couldn't be one of the protagonists of 12 Years a Slave. He's not that good of an actor to completely change anything like that. But with anything else, I think if his character suited it, he would be phenomenal. But yeah, age-wise, it needs to work, as Megan very more eloquently than I put it, just maturity.
All right, so before I get your final review, I'm going to drop in a couple of letterbox ones that I found. So we have one by Ian West, and he says, I haven't watched this in 10 years or more. And yeah, bleeding skylines, palm trees, the damn coyote, sociopathic, assassin Tom Cruise, that club scene, this thing has such a pulse. Michael Mann's Terminator still owns, which we didn't talk about, but was in the back of my mind. I think that's a really interesting reference point.
Oh, because I mentioned about Terminator 2, didn't I? They've been running. That's interesting.
The relentless nature of Vincent and the like unstoppable nature, yeah.
It links with what you were saying about the horror thing, because that's what I think, like, what James Cameron does with Aliens and Terminator is mixing horror with another genre, normally sci-fi-esque, which he does really well.
All right, Sydney says he was blown away by this. Not only is Fox and Cruise's chemistry off the charts, but what a patient and symbolic thrill ride that ends with such a bang. Their dialogue is dripping with meaning and suspense. That was all caps dripping, by the way. Cruise is, I should have gone dripping. Cruise is the terrifying, malevolent force, and Fox is just a guy, both stagnant and solitary, but one of them has a chance to take the leap out. No definitive answers like life, but certainly a lot to think about. Really cool and really haunting. And what I like in this one is the people he references. So Mann, this director, Refn, and the Safdies seem to be a nice generational trio of gritty, kinetic, neo-noir underworlds. And I think I'm about to get major tunnel vision. And I think those three directors, or four, because the Safdies are brothers, are an interesting comparison. I don't know if you've watched much Nicholas Winding Refn movies. You've probably seen Drive with Ryan Gosling.
I have. I think that's a brilliant movie. It's on our list, but Megan hasn't seen it yet. I think that's the kind of film she has to be in the right mindset for. Sure. Because I feel like that kind of film, if she watches that and she's not wanting to watch it, it's a film she won't like. But if you pay attention and you're wanting to watch it, it's a very, very good movie.
Yeah. I would also just go for the assumption that I probably haven't seen any of the films.
Yeah, fair enough. The Safdies did Uncut Gems with Adam Sandler. That's their most famous movie.
I've heard that movie is Adam Sandler's best film, but I've not actually seen it.
Tense.
Yeah, I've heard about that film. In fact,
what's it called?
Uncut Gems.
No.
Were you thinking of the depressing Adam Sandler film?
No, I just didn't hear what the name of the film was.
Because there's Adam Sandler. I think it's Rain Over Me. Is that Adam Sandler?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
there's a 9/11 movie. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I've heard. There's like a small handful of films that Adam Sandler does incredible acting in.
Punch Drunk Love is my favourite of his. With I'm trying to think. There's so many of them with Paul Thomas Anderson. Not Wes Anderson or not Paul W.S. Anderson, with Paul Thomas Anderson, who's like Magnolia and There Will Be Blood. And so he did a rom-com with Adam Sandler.
Interesting.
Well worth checking out. All right, we're nearly there. Nick says, Collateral is what happens when mainstream action thriller meets art house noir. Michael Mann's inherent endeavours to stylize everything he touches is simply a blessing. And on top of Oscar-worthy acting from Jamie Foxx and Tom Cruise, Collateral is for sure one of the most memorable action thrillers of the 2000s. He writes a lot more, but we'll stop there.
I mean, art house is not in any way how I would describe this film.
No?
I would describe this. No, I mean, Megan's got a little thing, which is if something's art house or a cult classic, she generally won't like it, even if she doesn't know it's before watching it.
No, that's not true.
It just seems to be a trend of films.
Generally, if a film is deemed as a cult classic, and it's not because, as Mike said, it's not because I've heard it's a cult classic and there I'm like, oh, I'm not going to like it. It's just that generally those films are so hyped up. Like Fight Club, for example.
She doesn't like it very much.
I don't like Fight
Kills
Club.
me.
I don't like Pulp Fiction.
But I argue Pulp Fiction is actually not a cult classic because.
What about Kill Bill?
No, Tarantino's a weird one. He's he's probably like the most famous cult classic maker ever. It's really bizarre. It kind of depends because with art,
I would class this as art house.
Art? You think Tarantino's art house?
No. This film, Collateral. We're talking about the film that we're talking about.
Right. But art house for me, when I think of art house, the first two films I think of is Let the Right One In, which might be because of the vampire conversation again with Spider Dan. But it was Let the Right One In. I think of a film called Under the Skin with Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah,
which I was not a fan of. I saw it in the cinema as well, and that's for me is too art housey. And Let the Right One In, I think, is perfectly art housey. And I feel like if you took the coyote scene out of this, I don't know how, and maybe 15 seconds of the ending, I personally don't even know how you would put any part of this as art house. Because for me, art house is taking your time, clever, brilliant shots, often either a lot of music or almost no music. Like it's killing in the name of. It's a film with Brad Pitt. It's about Killing Me Softly.
Oh right, yeah.
That I'd class that more as an art housey sort of film because there's some shots in that are fucking amazing and so beautifully done, and a lot of maybe very well used slow mo, and I think that works. And like the rain scenes and things, I think that would be art housey. But this is like
I would definitely class it, and as much as I hate it because it's my surname, I would definitely class it as gritty. And I hate it when my surname gets used as an adjective, but
nitty gritty is your least favourite, isn't it?
Yeah, let's get down to the nitty gritty. But yeah, it's very like rough. Is that a right word?
Kind of. I think it's because it's kind of almost underground-ish in the sense of it's hitman
it's
killing
dark.
people. Yeah, it's
well, it's one of the first kind of digital movies, like pure digital. I know, like obviously Lucas was a pioneer, but in terms of having the camera at the stage where it's going to be from this point moving forwards, Mann was quite a key pioneer in that, and you can tell it in the scenes where things do look grainy. Maybe perhaps look a bit grainy, but also you get that depth of field. You can see really far back into LA skyline, and it's all twinkly lights, and it looks like it's in focus, which you just can't do with old school filmmaking. So Mann was an early adopter of this format, and this is one of the first films that uses it.
Yeah, I don't think he did any. I don't think any of the cinematography is bad at all. I'd say there weren't much cinematography. I'd say was actively bad. There's a couple of plot beats that maybe don't make a huge amount of sense in mine because obviously we've already delved into that. But I think some of the shots, as we said near the start, the Jamie Foxx speaking to Jada Pinkett Smith, that part you can see. You know, when I was watching it, I was like, oh, the cinematographer or director of photography or just director knows what they're doing with shots. That it didn't feel like there was any problems with that. So yeah, I'd be inclined to agree in that regard, but I would not. If you'd have asked me to describe this film in 100 film terms, I wouldn't have used.
That might be what people that's referencing there, though. Is that sense of like it's doing something new, it's pushing the boundaries, it's taking the art form somewhere where it hadn't gone before from a big name director as well. I think it is a big deal. So maybe that's what they're talking about, and he's stuck to digital ever since. Actually, slightly offbeat. If you like Killing Me Softly, and you like the idea of, I'm thinking of Let the Right One In and not as far as Under the Skin, watch The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, which is the same director as Killing Me Softly, Andrew Dominic. That is a slow, meandering, I mean that in a positive way, introspective view on the Western myth and who Jesse James was.
Yeah, because I think
compared to who he really is.
The
Amazing.
name of that film and being like, whoa, that's a long title.
Well, the title kind of suggests the experience you're going to get, to be fair.
Yeah, I would say last thing with art housey-esque is makes me think of kind of No Country for Old Men. I think that for me is enough art housey. It's just it takes its time. I think art house does a lot, and I think that's what it does. It doesn't have to have guns blazing and loads of crazy stuff to happen to have deep cuts. I think for me that's part of it. All
right, my last review, because I've got to get him in. Good old Lou Shoemaker. I'm going to have to try and get in touch with, because I'm using him every time, because he beat me by a couple of years watching all the Jason Statham movies and logged them all on Letterboxd. So he says, Jason Statham was in this for maybe 5 seconds. He's the guy who hands Tom Cruise his briefcase at the beginning of the movie. The only thing to say about him here is that a fan theory is that he's playing Frank Martin, his character from the Transporter movies. Like all fan theories, people took this too far and started insisting that he was literally playing Frank Martin here, and even went so far as to update tmdb.org, I'd never heard of this, and thereby Letterboxd. I think it's the on Letterboxd, and if you guys use it, you could be like, you can pay him, have a certain level. If you go up high enough, it can it can pull in all the information from like IMDb.
Oh, right.
To say, like people like to have all the names of the actors and stuff so that you can track how many you've seen and all that kind of thing. So I think this is the system that helps that to work. To credit him as Frank Martin in this, but I went back and fixed it. So I like the fact that, this guy's committed. So I really need to at some point try and see if he's available online and if he wants to come on and chat the Stath.
100%. That would be a really fun thing to do.
All right. So for you guys, though, because this is what we're here for. For you, that was their views. But for you, in terms of Jason Statham's filmography, from what you know of your 6 and your 8, if I remember correctly, would you deem this a classic movie, something worth catching, or for completists only?
And is this just our view of this movie as a whole, or this as a Jason Statham movie?
As a Jason Statham movie.
It's completist only. It's almost. I mean, I'm glad we did this and recorded it because the film was very enjoyable, regardless of my critiques. And speaking with you, it's
not a Jason Statham movie.
Even.
I mean, as you said, well, I think I've already said it, but like, Mike literally had to be like, "Yeah, that was him," because I genuinely did blink and miss it.
Yeah, so I would say in the realm of that, but I will put an asterisk next to it and just quietly say, I think if excluding the filmography element of this, of those 3 things, I would probably lean more on classic, to be honest. I think, regardless of the flaws, this is a film worth watching. I think people should give this a go, and it does a lot right, which I appreciate. Great.
Thank you very much. Oh, and of course, we cannot forget, Mike. I nearly went and I forgot. In terms of our 4 categories with the Stath as well that you set up for me, I do appreciate it. Obviously, we don't have any in this occasion. He doesn't snog anyone. He doesn't shag anyone. He doesn't slay anyone. And we don't get to see any skin, sadly, because it's just not long enough. Imagine if you fit all that into a minute. That would have been quite impressive.
That would be cool. I mean, this is not the case, but you could maybe argue that anyone Tom Cruise kills before losing the briefcase is due to Statham from providing him with those things. But I think if you go into indirect kills in the filmography, you'd take hours trying to figure it out.
Absolutely, yeah. All right. Thank you both. I really appreciate it. It's been good fun. Do you want to let people know what they can expect from you in the near future? This is due out in 3 weeks, I think. So middle to late August.
Well, Megan loves talking about herself. She adores doing that. And also the only thing she likes doing more than talking about herself is promoting herself on social media.
Promoting my Instagram account that doesn't really get much attention at the moment.
You've had a bit of a rebirth.
The last time I posted was about 2 weeks ago.
Well, this is coming out 3 weeks. So currently, people listening, it might be 5 weeks ago.
I'll probably post a picture of the dog within this time, but yeah, it's been a while. But yeah, I'm on Instagram. I might post from time to time. It depends on
when this comes out,
on where I am. But it's Grits Gets Fit. There I am. That's where I am. You can find me there.
Yeah, and okay, if you follow her, you may occasionally see photos of me. But if you want to see photos of Megan more frequently, it's probably best to follow me on Instagram and keep an eye on my stories, because on the very rare occasions we'll have that. And if you want to see our puppy as well, I've been posting a few photos of that. A lot more of them on Patreon. Kept a few cute ones.
Oh, that's where you can find me, Patreon.
Yeah, Megan is so amazing.
I'm behind a paywall.
Which, you get only a few people like that. Russell Brand's behind a paywall. Sam Harris behind a paywall. Megan Gritty behind a paywall. So, top tier podcasters of the sort of the 21st century. But yeah, follow me on social media at Genuine Chits Chat, Instagram, Twitter, and on Facebook. Obviously, my show, Genuine Chits Chat. I've had Jack on more than once, in fact, and I've got my other show, Star Wars Comics in Canon, which is obviously on the feed of Comics in Motion. And you never have to read a single Star Wars comic in your entire life. If you just like Star Wars in general and you enjoy the movies, check out my show. I do character information. I go through the comics, talk about the plot details and things like that, and the various connections to increase your canon knowledge. Genuine chit chat, speak to a different guest on every episode. I've spoken to fellow podcasters such as Jack and many members of Comics in Motion. I've also spoken to a lot of people to do with Star Wars, a lot of people nothing to do with Star Wars. And recently, the episode that's just been released will have been, or the last month or so, will be an episode with Mandy Wong, who is an animator and artist. And I think she's a friend of Ria's, actually. It's how I got into contact with her. And she was absolutely delightful. And then there's also, it sounds like a bit wheezy, doesn't it, when I'm breathing in oddly? Hear that? Not sure why. Getting too excited about the Stath. And then also I did an episode with Mary Kenny, who is actually a senior writer at Insomniac Games, and she was one of the writers for Spider-Man Miles Morales, and she's currently writing the Wolverine game as well, and she's got a book out called Gamer Girls. So lots of reasons. Basically, listen to Genuine Chit Chat because I have a wide variety of guests talking about a wide variety of things. So you look through the back catalogue, you'll find something that you'll enjoy, if only random appearances from Megan when she feels like it. But follow me on social media or, patreon.com/genuine chit chat, and you will 100% get Megan 3 times a month normally on there, because I occasionally do book reviews without you, because you don't read Star Wars books. So having your review of it would just
Correct.
be, it's all right. But yeah, you want to hear Megan sing? It's behind a paywall.
33p per appearance. Do you know what I mean? Like, what a bargain.
That is,
Absolute bargain.
Phenomenal. In a few years' time, people listen to that, it'll be the same price as a Freddo. So, think about how much fuel costs, guys, at the moment. Okay? Think about for £1 a month, so literally less than a litre of fuel, you get access to hours of Megan ripping me to shreds and putting me in my place.
Let that joy drive you forwards in life.
It's delightful. And thank you so much, Jack, for having us on. It's always delightful speaking with you. And there's going to be many things in the future we're going to plan, as well as, this is probably not going to come out for a year, but obviously we did the Star Wars Visions conversation, which is delightful, and they've announced a series 2 of that. So, unless it's like 1 billion episodes. If there's 9 again, we'll do it in one episode. If there's more, we'll potentially have to split it. But I'll try and make sure we do another podcast before then, and it's not going to be when we come on to do the Meg. We'll try and do some other stuff, but it's always delightful collaborating with you.
You too, both of you. Yeah, lots to look forward to. All right, thank you everyone else for listening and partaking in this journey with me through the Stath filmography. That was, of course, Collateral. Next up in a fortnight is Cellular, followed by Transporter 2 for anyone that is watching along. I've been I'm Jack's Musings, that's JACS, and you can find me on Twitter where I am most active. You can also contact the show directly on Twitter under the name Back to the Film Og. Make sure you use the hashtag #FollowTheFilmography. This show has been presented to you by the Pop Gorillas, a collection of hive minds who provide spoiler-free reviews of anything from pop culture in less time than it takes to listen to a song. I'm also a proud member of the Comics in Motion family, alongside these lovely people. A super place full of the world's greatest people, dedicated to bringing you podcasts on a variety of geeky topics. So please make sure you take the time to search, subscribe, and rate our shows whenever and wherever you listen. Until next time, be excellent to each other and make sure you take the time to treat yourself too. I am Jack signing off. Yippee-ki-yay, movie lovers. Cut.